Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Guardian Naruto Got Harem. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. King Mickey, Queen Minnie, I bear grave news, spoke the form of Ansem the Wise, a disheartened look on his face as he looked away from the two rulers of Disney Castle, unable to look them in the eyes due to the news he was about to give them. Speak plainly, Ansem. Please, we need to know what is happening to the realms, Mickey requested in an urgent manner, aware that strange happenings had been occurring throughout the realms. And if Ansem knew what was happening, then maybe they could repair the damage before it was too late. Very well. To be put in the bluntest terms, the barrier separating the realms is disappearing. Soon it will cease to exist entirely and the worlds shall all converge upon one another. Ansem explained briefly, stroking his beard slightly. Both Mickey and Minnie gasped in shock and looked to one another. The former then crossed his arms and spoke in as calm a tone as he could muster. I see. That is terrible indeed. Are the Heartless responsible for this, and what would happen when the barrier vanishes? Ansem the Wise crossed his arms behind his back, almost hesitant to share the news with them, but they had to know all the same. Possible, but extremely unlikely. I firmly believe that the Heartless have nothing to do with this. And what would happen, you ask, if, and when the barrier is extinguished, the worlds would soon come together and then violently collide. The loss of life would be nothing short of catastrophic. He explained, earning looks of pure horror from the two monarchs. Can anything be done to prevent this? There must be something we can do, Minnie asked almost pleadingly, looking for any possibility of hope. The barrier itself is beyond the scope of repair, and attempting to tamper with it to fix it may accelerate its degeneration. There is, however, one solution. I propose that we leave way for one world to become the main existence within creation, and all the rest shall be sealed away into books, much akin to Winnie the Pooh's 100-acre wood. Thus all the realms would be kept safe. Ansem spoke in a calm manner, earning nods of approval from his hosts. Such an undertaking would be difficult, but if it meant protecting all the worlds from danger, then it would be worth it. I see. I agree wholeheartedly with this plan. I shall summon the best magic users in the realms to aid us. But then if the worlds are all sealed away, who will guard them from the outside world, and which world will the books be kept in? Mickey asked as he began pacing about in thought, many questions and uncertainties filling his mind. I have selected one candidate already, a realm predominated by humans and is filled with ninjas. It is referred to as the Elemental Nations. Remarkably, there are no signs of any Heartless ever appearing there for reasons unknown, and it is one of the few realms unaware of the collapsing barrier. As for our guardian, I have already made some arrangements, Ansem replied and gestured towards a figure that was standing quietly in a corner, watching the proceedings between the monarchs. Keyblade Master Aqua, at your service, she spoke, giving a small boy. Mickey then slapped himself on the side of the head. Who would be better to guard the realms than a Keyblade Master? Excellent, it seems we're mostly set and ready. We must get underway immediately to prevent the coming cataclysm, Mickey shouted gleefully, then immediately left to write the necessary letters and send word to various magic users about the situation. For the safety of the realms, they must not fail. 5 years later, the plan had worked. It was a complete success, and all the realms remained blissfully unaware as they all continued their separate yet connected existences within their respective storybooks. Meanwhile, in the Shinobi realm, Aqua lived a quiet life of semi-retirement, working as a librarian. What better place to hide a number of world-containing books than a library after all? Plus she had them tucked away into a hidden area of the library only she was aware of. It was soon getting difficult to remember the last time she needed to bring out her Keyblade, since there was no Heartless in this world. She soon came to enjoy the quiet and found herself utterly at peace. So long as the books remained undisturbed, then there was no reason for her to do anything. She occasionally checked in every now and again to ensure nothing was amiss, but so far all was really and truly peaceful. So, when do you get off? I'd be happy to treat you to dinner, spoke a masculine voice that was attempting to be charming. It was just the opposite, since it made her feel quite ill. That was perhaps the only thing wrong with being a quiet and reserved librarian. Men constantly hit on her, almost every day. And this guy, some teacher named Uruka, was perhaps the most persistent of them all. No thanks, I prefer much younger guys, she replied in a disinterested tone as she pretended to read a book, hoping that acting the part of what's called a shodaken would turn off any males that would try and flirt with her. And in most cases, it did. I'm not that old, Aqueson, he retorted, his smile not faltering as he attempted to smooth talk her, complimenting her on her shimmering blue hair. This only annoyed the Keyblade Master further as he kept on trying to butter her up. Finally she snapped her book shut and turned to him, adjusting a pair of reading glasses as she spoke. Enough. I am sick and tired of your advances. Let me put this in a way that your undeveloped brain can understand. I do not want to date you. I am not interested in dating you. And I think you are a selfish, annoying, and much too clingy man with no respect for my personal space or my feelings. Now, go away, and don't ever come back here if you're just going to flirt with me, she ranted in an irritated tone. Then she began making a shooing motion as she opened up her book and resumed reading from it. With a disappointed and angered growl, Haruka left the library much to her relief. Time passed on as the frequent visitors and academy students came and went since Aqua's library was amongst the most popular ones in Konoha due to its size, selection of books, and convenient distance between a number of homes and the academy itself. Although this also attracted the loathsome sorts like Haruka when they learned that a young, beautiful, and single woman was in charge of the whole thing. Still, it had its upsides to say the least, and overly flirtatious men were one of the few if only issues she had in daily life. Soon, it grew darker outside and the last of the visitors left the library, prompting Aqua to flip the door sign to closed and lock the doors for the night. She then went over to her desk and switched off most of the lights, save for the dimmed backup lights so she could navigate the rows of shelves and books as she made her way towards her office, bedroom on the second floor. Turning the key into the lock, she opened the door then locked it back behind her as she lazily flopped onto the couch. Feeling a little exhausted after that outburst against that Haruka guy, hoping that maybe he will have gotten the message and will leave her alone now. Her belly rumbled slightly in hunger, prompting her to begin preparing some dinner for the evening. Maybe something quick and easy since she wasn't interested in anything time-consuming. Unknown to her, she forgot something in the library. Meanwhile, holy crap, how long did I sleep for? Asked the form of one Naruto Uzumaki as he had just recently woken up from a nap that was apparently much too long. The last thing that he remembered was reading up on some history of Konoha for an upcoming test. But as he flipped through the pages, he couldn't help but hear Uruka's boring-ass lecture voice playing inside his head, reciting the words he was reading, and thus put him to sleep. It was weird to say the least. Yes, that's what happens if you fail the academy 2 years in a row and are forced to listen to the same lectures day after day. With a sigh, he got up from his seat and headed for the front doors to leave, only to find them already locked up. What the hell, I slept past closing time, wait, so I am stuck inside of here until morning, he asked himself, unaware that the owner herself in fact lived inside of the building. Grumbling slightly, he gave a light kick to the door in frustration and marched back to his previous napping spot, only to find something off the books he was reading before were all missing now except for one. Where had the others gone? His jaw then dropped when he saw a small girl about a foot in height fly over to the table and pick up the book, giggling to herself as she flew off with it. Just gotta put this last one back and the day will be oh. She spoke at the end in worry as she saw the blonde staring at her open-mouthed. Holy shit. Are you a fairy? The blonde muttered as he pointed at her with a shaky finger. The tiny girl then dropped the book and flew away, screaming that she shouldn't have been seen. Without even thinking, he chased after her. He chased her up and down the stacks, weaving and turning left and right to keep up with her. Surprised that she was so quick, but he often outran Chunin after a pranking spree, so this was nothing for him. Come on, open, the fairy yelled as she pushed on a section of the wall which was actually a hidden pressure plate, which then opened, revealing a passageway and a flight of stairs. No, Riku, don't lead him down there, shouted another fairy, prompting the blonde to look up at the top of the stacks to find two other fairies looking down on the scene in horror. This made Naruto wonder what was down there in the first place, something they didn't want him to see, obviously. Perhaps an entire fairy kingdom hidden underground, whatever it was. His own curiosity got the better of him and he began running down the stairs without any thought to his actions other than to see their big secret. The passageway closing behind him. This is bad. Very, very bad. Somebody get Master Aqua now, yelled the second fairy as she began to panic and flew off towards the Keyblade user's private quarters to warn her of the vault's discovery. Meanwhile, as Naruto descended by the torchlit tunnel, he at last found himself in a room with a series of books, all sitting on ornate pedestals. He raised an eyebrow and wondered why these particular books were separated from all the others and hidden down here. And why did those fairies not want him to see them? Was there something special about them? He skimmed over the titles and found some recognizable titles. Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, Alice in Wonderland, to name a few. It seemed a number of these were classic fairy tales, though what made them special was still a mystery to him. He touched one titled Lion King and opened it to see its contents, but then he saw a flash of light and vanished out of existence, and then the book shut itself. After a few moments, Aqua appeared, glancing frantically about for the young intruder, her eyes widening when she realized that he must have opened one of the books and entered into a realm. But which one? Seeing no choice, she would need to search the realms one by one until she found them. I am sorry, Master Aqua, I made a huge mistake. I led him here too, I am a horrible assistant. The fairy called Riku cried as she hanged her head in shame, tears falling down her face since she felt she had failed her friend and master. Don't worry, we can fix this. I just need to find the boy, make him drink a memory loss potion, and our problems will be solved. It's not too late, but we'll be having a discussion about this later. Aqua spoke as she gently patted the gullwing's head. The brunette's librarian attire vanished and was replaced by her armor. With a deep sigh, Aqua selected Cinderella as her first realm to search for the boy. Hopefully he didn't end up anywhere truly dangerous. It'd be bad if he went to Wonderland and ticked off the easily offended Queen of Hearts and thus lost his head, for example. Elsewhere, in the Pride Lands, "oh shit," were the only words that escaped the Jinchuriki's mouth. Now finding himself amidst a herd of elephants, peacefully eating and ignoring his presence as he slowly inched away, not wanting to startle them for fear of being trampled to death by the giant animals. An angry elephant was one animal you wouldn't want to contend with after all. but thankfully it seemed like they didn't have any interest in him. Once he was in the clear, he let out a sigh of relief as he took in his surroundings. He saw lush green plains and grazing herds all across the lands, which made him smile at how peaceful everything looked. It was actually quite beautiful and breathtaking to say the least. And this was supposed to be a world inside of a book. If this one was like this, then what other wonders did the other books contain? This is neat, the blonde muttered as he smiled, unsure whether to be in shock or ecstatic at this discovery, despite the fact his mind was running a mile a minute at this point. His ears twitched slightly as he heard something move behind him, his hand cautiously reaching down to his kunai holster. Then a yellow blur appeared out of the corner of his eye. Using his free hand, the blonde snatched the blur from the air and pinned it to the ground, only to find a lion cub. "Okay, uncle, you win," the cub yelped in a female voice as she squirmed under his grip. His eyes widened as he released her and he made some sputtering sounds, realizing that the cub had just spoken. It then set into his mind that perhaps she was some kind of a summons, so then it wouldn't be that strange if she could talk. Clearing his throat, he smiled sheepishly and spoke, "Sorry about that. You kind of surprised me there. You shouldn't sneak up on a ninja." The tan-colored cub got up on her feet and groomed herself a little, replying back with an adorable smile, "It's okay. I guess I kinda deserve that for pouncing on you." "And what is a ninja?" she asked at the end, tilting her head in curiosity. "What's a ninja?" "Well, it's a kind of warrior, I guess," the blonde replied, trying to put it in the most basic of terms for the lioness to understand. "Really, that sounds so cool. My name is Nala. What are you supposed to be anyway? I thought you were some kind of weird hairless monkey," she asked him innocently, circling around his legs and sniffing at him a bit. "Why no, I'm a human," he replied, and quickly realized that perhaps if she was asking, then humans never came into the territory of her pride. Human ho human. Never heard of those before. Wow, I must have found the only human in the Pride Lands. My friend Simba is gonna be so jealous," she exclaimed proudly and started bouncing around on her paws with glee. "Pride Lands, huh? This your turf or something? To be honest, I think I'm a little lost. I opened up a book and well ended up here, I guess," he tried to explain. Come to think of it, how was he supposed to get back home now if he was stuck inside a book? "Yep, our King Mufasa rules over these lands. If anyone can help you get back home, I'm sure he can lend you a paw." "And what's a book? Is that some kind of cave or a den?" she asked as she tilted her head again, causing the whiskered teen to mentally slap himself, since there were a lot of human terms, names, and objects that would be alien to her and the other lions. "How do I explain? Well, a book is a type of object that we humans use to tell stories," he explained as best he could, making Nala's eyes widen in amazement. She then giggled and rubbed against his legs like a common house cat. "That sounds cool too. You have got to tell me more about humans. Oh, we can talk more on the way to Pride Rock. I can't wait to show everyone my new human friend." She spoke with a toothy grin showing off her fangs. Naruto returned the smile and then scooped Nala up and put him square on his shoulders, with the upper half of his body resting atop his head. "There, now I can give you a ride." "Which way's your home?" he asked, smiling as the cub giggled gleefully at being so high up now. "Not far. See that big rock formation over there? That's Pride Rock. Can't miss it," she replied and pointed it out to him. If there was anywhere for a lion pride and their king to make a home, that would definitely be it. Naruto then marched forward and began to whistle a merry tune. All the while Nala started asking him random questions about humans, to which he answered as best he could, or simply say he didn't know if he had no answer to give. Nevertheless, it felt good to make a new friend, even if it was a spunky lioness cub. After some walking, Naruto soon came to realize exactly how large Pride Rock actually was, and wondered if it may have been formed somehow during an earthquake if it stood the way it did. But he didn't really bother asking his new friend since she was so full of questions, and he actually enjoyed trying to answer them. At last, he was greeted by some lionesses who were all whispering amongst themselves about the new arrival. Nala, not even into adulthood and already bringing food for the pride, asked a lioness whom Naruto assumed was Nala's mother. He chuckled since it was obvious that she was just teasing him and her tone held no threat or malice to it. Deciding now was a good time to put Nala on the ground, he placed her gently in front of the lioness, the cub seemingly disappointed that she couldn't ride on him anymore. "He's not food, Mom. He's my new friend and he's what's called a human. He's actually super nice and let me ride on him on the way back." She spoke happily as she introduced him, then pulled on her mother's leg a bit to try and bring her closer to the ninja in training. "My name's Naruto. Nice to meet you, ma'am," he greeted politely and gave a friendly wave, the lionesses all giggling and whispering things like "he's so cute" and "what a sweetheart" and other such phrases. "Seraphina, nice to meet you too. What brings you to the Pride Lands? We have never had a human before," she asked him, sniffing curiously at his clothes since he was covered in strange foreign smells that she had never experienced. He must have come from a truly interesting place. "Well, that's the thing. I think I'm a little on the lost side right now, and I have no idea how to get home. Nala here mentioned that maybe your king could help me out," the blonde had asked, almost pleadingly, earning some sympathetic ahwas from the lionesses. Before Seraphina could reply, a deep masculine voice beat her to the punch by speaking, "I can certainly try." From above inside the lion's den came a massive lion with a deep crimson mane, and at his sides was another lioness that was likely his mate, and a second lion with a mane as black as night and a scar across his eye. The second male lion's scowl gave Naruto a sense of unease. "Mufasa, at your service." The king politely introduced himself and gave the boy a nod of respect. Naruto, at yours. I am sorry if I'm intruding on your turf. I've had kind of a weird day. The whiskered teen replied with a small sigh. I'm sure. Regardless, I welcome you to Pride Rock as my personal guest. Please, make yourself at home. At least until you find a way home. The king offered with a small smile, immediately sensing a pure heart and spirit emanating from the lad. Now just a moment, are we really allowing a stranger to stay amongst us? We know nothing about him or his kind. He could be a threat to us, spoke the black-maned lion, his voice alone making the ninja in training feel like every word the scarred lion spoke was coated in venom. Much like a scheming politician with pink hair that he knew. Mufasa let out a brief and then asked Naruto directly, "Are you a danger to us?" To which the boy replied point-blank while looking the king directly in the eyes with a curt no. Nodding in satisfaction, the king replied to his brother, "There you have it. I doubt he came all this way with young knowledge just to cause us harm. And if he did, then there are plenty of lionesses to keep an eye on him." The king half-joked and half-warned at the end, earning only a nod of understanding from the boy. The blonde then felt something tugging on the sleeve of his jumpsuit and saw it was the lioness accompanying the king. "Come along now, let's join the others. You must be tired." She spoke in a kind of motherly tone, so he chose to follow her without protest. She guided him towards a cool and shady spot to the side of Pride Rock where other lionesses were lounging about and catnapping. "My name is Sarabi, Mufasa's mate and queen." She introduced herself and sat down, with the grace and poise befitting of a queen. "Good to meet you too. Who was that other lion with the black mane? Has he always had a stick up his ass or something?" the blonde asked, temporarily forgetting his manners. His question earning several snorts and giggles from the other Pride members that heard him. Even Sarabi had to stifle some laughter but still managed to keep her composure. "He is Scar, the king's brother. Pay him no mind, he is always like that. I recommend that you give him a wide berth though. He isn't the most welcoming member of the Pride," she warned him, making the boy nod. Then with a smile, he reached over and started to scratch the queen behind her ears, admiring the softness of her fur and believed that she must groom herself daily. Sarabi's eyes widened at the alien feeling, and a deep rumbling purr came from her throat. What is this? Is this how you humans show affection?" she asked him as she relaxed at his touch. It was a strange feeling but definitely a pleasant one as she felt his fingers rub into her fur and flesh. "It's called petting, and yeah, I guess it is." "You want me to stop?" he asked her, hoping that he hadn't offended the queen. "No, keep going. Would you mind doing that a little lower please?" she asked him, and he happily obliged. Then he quickly found himself surrounded by other curious lionesses, all wanting to experience the petting by his hands. He then looked up and saw that Mufasa was watching from a short distance away, smiling and almost laughing at the scene. King Mufasa, a little help. I think I just bit off more than I can chew." Naruto almost pleaded as the Pride members drew closer to him and started to nuzzle him from all sides, almost demanding his attention. "Aha, you're on your own now," the king called out in amusement and then let out a full-blown laugh when the boy was lion-piled by the Pride members. This was definitely going to be amusing to say the least. But then he scowled as he wondered where his cub Simba was, and his brother Scar seemed to have gone off to spirits knows where, likely berating his mate again. It might be worth checking in to see if his son had gotten into any undue mischief. Still, after that encounter with the hyenas, the cub should now know better than to wander where he shouldn't. He was likely playing somewhere nearby and the king would see him on his usual rounds. Later, "What you doing there?" asked Nala as she found Naruto in a secluded spot behind Pride Rock, the whiskered teen sitting in front of a fire he had built and was using it to roast some meat from the lioness's most recent kill. The huntresses showing their hospitality by giving him a share as the king's guest. "Cooking this here meat. Humans like me need to cook our food like this, otherwise we might get sick," he explained briefly, chuckling as the cub pushed a stick into the fire and watched it burn in the flames. "Really, so you use fire to do that? How'd you even make this anyway?" she asked him, still filled with an almost limitless supply of questions for him. In response, he held out a pair of flint stones he kept on his person in case he needed them. "These, I strike them together to make sparks which helps me get a fire going." "Where's Mufasa anyway?" Seemed like he went off somewhere, he asked her, hoping that the king would soon help him find a way back home. "Well, he is the king. He's got to make sure the Pride lands are protected, that there is no overhunting, and other such things. He'll be back before you know it. But now that I think on it, I haven't seen my pal Simba either. He would have definitely loved to meet you. I'm starting to get a bit worried," she admitted, her ears falling flat as she worried about her best friend. Mufasa might be looking for him out there. "Hey, want some of this?" He offered her a piece of cooked meat to help lighten her mood. She immediately perked up and accepted, snatching the meat from his fingers and munching on it. "It tastes a bit weird like this and it's kinda hot, but it doesn't taste bad," she spoke after she swallowed it down, earning a quick scratch behind the ears making her purr in content. "That's okay. You aren't used to cooked meat. If you want, we can go on a hike to try and find your buddy Simba and make sure everything is okay," he offered since he could tell that Simba's disappearance was bothering her. Plus he could get to know the landscape better this way. "Two birds with one stone and all that. Thanks, I'll go let my mom know that we're heading out," the cub replied in a grateful voice before scampering off to do just that, leaving her human friend to enjoy the rest of his meal. After a few minutes of waiting and eating, the blonde heard sounds of arguing. Turning towards the direction of the noise, he saw Scar and a lioness he didn't recognize yelling at one another for some reason. Then out of nowhere, the black-maned lion swiped her across the face with his paw, then patted off somewhere. Growing concerned, the blonde got up and approached the lioness who was nursing her injured cheek. Fortunately, there wasn't any that had been drawn, meaning Scar hadn't used his claws. "Excuse me, ma'am. You okay there?" he asked her in a gentle tone, but inwardly he was angry at Scar for treating a lady so poorly. In response, she growled at him and glared as she spoke in an angry tone. "What's it to you, human? You shouldn't have been eavesdropping. Now go away," she half roared at him, flashing her sharp teeth. The blonde calmly took a step back to give her some space, but knew that she wasn't actually angry at him per se. "I didn't really hear anything. I just saw him hit you, so I came over to see if you needed a little help or something," he replied in as calm a tone as possible to help cool off her rising temper. At his words, she seemed taken aback that he was being nice to her, like the term kindness was a foreign concept to her. "Why don't you have enough females swooning over you already? What do you want from me?" she demanded, obviously mistrustful of strangers. "Nothing really. What do you think, I'm some guy that wants something just for being nice? I'm not that shallow," he responded and crossed his arms, a warm smile crossing his lips. He then slowly approached her in spite of her growling. Kneeling down, he took her paw in his hands and lowered it down, then gently rubbed her stinging cheek, making her flinch slightly. "Looks like he got you pretty good. If you don't mind, what the heck was all that about anyway?" he asked her, hoping to better understand why the black-maned lion decided to hit her. "Personal business. Not for you to know," she responded coldly, refusing to answer him. Although the blonde saw one of her paws reach toward her belly for a moment, but he chose to change the subject instead. "I don't think I've met you just yet. What's your name?" he asked her, then started scratching her behind the ears, a tactic that seemed to almost immediately win over every single lioness he had encountered thus far. At first she tensed up, but she slowly relaxed and turned her head to the side. It was as if she were trying to keep him from seeing her face, which showed her enjoyment. "Zira, call me Zira," she responded begrudgingly, and then pulled away from him with an almost sorrowful expression on her face as she continued to speak. "You seem like a nice boy, but you should stay away from me. I'm toxic to others." With that cryptic phrase, she then left Naruto behind and walked off someplace else, making him wonder what she meant by that. Sighing, the whiskered teen shook his head and decided that he should find Nala so their search could be underway. A while later, "Hey Nala, you know a lioness called Zira?" Naruto asked as he marched across the Pride Lands, with Nala perched upon his shoulders again to give her a better look at their surroundings so she can find Simba easier. His question surprised her for a moment, but she answered him anyway. "A little. She kinda scares me. She's really mean and cranky all the time. Mom says it's because Zira's always hanging out with Scar," she answered in a half-distracted tone, straining her eyes to keep an eye out for her best friend. "What, she's Scar's girlfriend or something?" the blonde asked, wondering if the lioness was in what was known as a toxic relationship. "Or something," the cub replied bluntly, then looked off towards the nearby gorge, a massive dust cloud coming from it and a massive herd of wildebeests charging out of the other side. "Wonder what their hurry is," she commented, passing it off as the herd migrating to another feeding pasture. She hadn't noticed that Naruto stopped in his tracks and was staring out towards the gorge, a pit forming in his stomach. "Hey Nala, I think we should check out the gorge there." He spoke and began marching towards it, much to his friend's confusion. "Why you think Simba might be down there?" she asked him, though she doubted that her best friend would be down there with those wildebeests moving like that. "He'd be crushed into mush in no time flat." "Dunno, but I get the feeling that if we don't go there something very, very bad is going to happen," he replied in an ominous tone and broke off into a sprint, forcing his passenger to cling onto him tightly to avoid falling off. Hey, slow down, it's hard to hold on when you're running," she yelled, wrapping her front legs around the top of his head to steady herself. He ignored her as he charged on ahead to the ravine, his eyes flashing a myriad of colors in the sunlight. He then skidded to a halt at the edge of the cliffs and looked down, seeing nothing but wildebeests on the run, a dust cloud forming, and then his eyes caught a small cub dangling from a dead tree. "There he is," the blonde shouted, pointing towards the dead tree, knowing that the cub could only be the Simba that they had been looking for. "Simba!" Nala screeched in terror, seeing her friend in mortal danger. But unlike in the elephant graveyard, there was nowhere to run to. He was trapped, and if he or the tree fell, then he'd be trampled to death. Tears streamed down her face as she felt so helpless, unable to help her friend, and her heart thundering in her small at the peril he was in. Naruto swallowed dryly, then set Nala down on the ground and said to her, "Stay here. I'll get him." At his words, she instantly clamped her teeth into the legs of his pants and tugged on the fabric to get his attention. "What, are you crazy? You'll be killed. I can't lose two friends in the same day," she cried out, unable to comprehend that the human was going down into the gorge with a herd of stampeding wildebeests. It was a death wish. "If I don't go, Simba won't have a chance. And hey, remember that I'm a ninja. We live to beat the odds," he replied and gave a wink, before jumping down the cliff and began sliding down the rocks, leaving Nala to nervously pace back and forth as she ground her teeth together in anticipation. The whiskered teen stopped himself just short of the stampeding herd and swallowed nervously, silently cursing himself for playing the big hero. But it was now do or die time. Literally, this was likely going to be a defining moment in his soon-to-be career as a shinobi, so he may as well go all in. His mind set and made up, he rushed out in front of the charging animals and made a beeline towards the trapped cub. "I'd like to see those assholes Haruka and Sasuke do this crazy shit," Naruto yelled out as he weaved through the stampede, trying his best not to get knocked over. If he fell, then it would all be over for him. Gathering some chakra to his legs, he leapt high into the air and started to hop on the backs of the wildebeests, somehow managing to use their backs like stepping stones. Up on the cliffs, Mufasa, Zazu and Scar all arrived and bore witness to the scene, the king spotting Nala nearby who was pacing restlessly. And then his eyes averted towards the dead tree where his son was clinging to for dear life, and the human Naruto diving headfirst into mortal danger to save him. Growling slightly, the king wasn't sure to join in the rescue to save his son or entrust it to the crazy human. For now, he chose the latter and would wait in the event that he failed. But in this moment, he turned to his brother and stared at him with narrowed eyes. It now seemed rather convenient that his brother had known that Simba was in danger, perhaps a little too convenient. He would have to deal with that later, for now Simba's safety would come first. The king's heart then stopped beating in his when he saw the tree snap in half, from a wildebeest accidentally charging into it, sending his cub flying into the air until Naruto leapt up and caught him. "Gotcha, little buddy," the blonde yelled and clutched the young prince to his. The ninja's eyes widened when he landed dead center in the midst of the stampede. "Holy his crackers," the blonde yelled as he barely avoided being run over, stepping backwards in a panic only to be grazed by a wildebeest and knocked forward. "Help me, daddy, please," Simba yelled in a panic, struggling in the blonde's arms as his fight-or-flight instinct took over. Naruto then crouched down to the ground, trying to use his own body to shield the cub from harm. The ninja let out a sharp growl, refusing that this was his time to die right here. He still had so much to accomplish in life as a shinobi. He wanted to explore the world, see the other shinobi villages, fight the strongest people out there, but he was now trapped and unable to save a single lion cub. If only I wasn't so weak. If only I was just stronger. Maybe I would have been able to do more. But now look where I am, only pretending to be some big hero when all I am is just a class clown that's too big for his britches. He mused, then looked down into his arms, seeing that poor Simba had curled himself into a quivering of fur and flesh, trembling and waiting for the end. Gritting his teeth, Naruto felt so angry for some reason. Why did this have to happen? Why was life so unfair to the young and the innocent? Why did poor Simba have to suffer like this? Oi, you bastards, you're scaring Simba and making him cry. I don't like it, he muttered as a crimson aura flashed around him, the sky above starting to darken a bit. The wildebeests suddenly halted their charge, grinding down to a halt as they all stared at the boy. "You're all really pissing me off right now," the blonde growled out, his eyes now a deep crimson with a black slit pupil which stared down the animals, almost daring them to charge. "Why don't you all go away and scare the shit out of somebody else?" he roared loudly, causing spiderweb-like cracks to form beneath his feet, and a dread wind blew towards the wildebeests. They all trembled in terror, stamping their hooves as they tried to back away. Then various bellows came from the remainder of the herd and they began to run in the opposite direction, fleeing from the human. As they ran away, Naruto's eyes returned to their normal sky blue and he looked down at the cub in his arms. "Don't worry, they're gone. You okay there, little buddy?" Naruto spoke in a comforting voice, not bothering to wonder why the wildebeests ran from him. He was just going to count his blessings and appreciate the fact that both he and Simba were alive. "I peed," the cub replied with a sniffle, alerting his savior to a dark wet spot forming on the front of his jumpsuit, making the whiskered teen cringe a bit. Nothing a little water can't wash out, and given the circumstances I think it was justified. By the way, Simba, my name's Naruto in case you hadn't heard." Naruto muttered and lightly scratched the cub's head to help him relax. "Promise you won't tell anyone?" Naruto, Simba asked nervously with a small blush forming beneath his furry cheeks. It seemed like he was somewhat ashamed that he had just wet himself, and didn't want anyone to know of that embarrassing detail. "Tell about what?" he asked in a fake tone of confusion, earning an appreciative nod from the cub. It was not long before Nala, Zazu and the king came up to them, looks of relief on their faces. Mufasa picked up the cub gently from Naruto's arms with his mouth and nuzzled the cub affectionately, with Nala doing the same and beginning at her friend's fur. The king then turned to the boy, with a visible tear streaming down his face. "I will never, in all my years, forget that you have saved my son. There are no words I can give to describe how grateful I am to you." Mufasa spoke in pure gratitude, unable to fathom that the human had done what could be considered the impossible. "All in a day's work, your majesty. I'm just glad Simba's okay," Naruto replied modestly, smiling as Nala tried to help comfort her childhood friend. The king nodded and spoke. "Scar has gone back to Pride Rock to alert the lionesses on what happened. We should take the cubs home, most especially Simba. He's had a long day. Zazu, return to Pride Rock and inform everyone that Simba's alive and well, and that we are eternally indebted to our guest Naruto." At his command, the bird nodded and flew off into the sky to deliver the king's message. "Come, we should leave," Mufasa commanded, then lifted Simba up onto his back, with Nala hopping over to her human friend, looking up at him expectantly for a ride. But instead he was staring in the direction where the wildebeests retreated. "Hey, do you hear something?" Naruto asked in a crazy tone of voice, wondering if the others could hear it too. Perking their ears up, the lions could hear a noise that sounded almost like crying and wailing. Growing curious, they approached the general direction of the noise, with it growing louder as they came closer to its source. It was a hyena, standing in front of two others who were definitely run down by the wildebeest herd when Naruto somehow frightened them into running away. From the sound of the sobbing voice, it was a female. Squinting his eyes slightly, Mufasa instantly recognized the female hyena. "You again," he half-roared, making her freeze up and look over her shoulder towards the group. "Recognize her?" Naruto asked, getting the feeling that she and the lions had met before. "Yeah, she and her two pals tried to eat me and Simba back at the elephant graveyard," Nala answered, growling slightly as her fur stood on end, which would have been a bit scary if she wasn't an adorable cub. "I hardly find this to be a coincidence. You, hyena, why have you been trying to kill my son? Was it you and your companions that started the stampede?" Speak, the king demanded and flashed his teeth, stalking towards her and threatening to pounce. We were told to." "Okay, please, just please don't kill me. I don't want to die," she pleaded for her life, shrinking herself into the ground to make herself look as small and non-threatening as possible. "Told to confess and I might be convinced to spare you. Refuse, and you'll be taken to the black pits to die a slow and terrible death," Mufasa growled, his form towering over the whimpering hyena as she tried to bury her face into the ground. "Black pits, what are those?" Naruto asked as he crossed his arms, getting the feeling that it was something quite terrible if the king was threatening to use it. "The black pits is a small field where this black and sticky substance fills the ground. Once you set paw or hoof into it, there is no escape, and you are forced to endure a slow and agonizing death to die beneath the sun and later being picked apart by the vultures. It is a punishment reserved for only the worst of villains within the Pride Lands, a fate that this hyena may soon meet if she doesn't speak." The king directed the last sentence to the cowering female. From Mufasa's description, it sounded like it was in fact a tar pit, but the whiskered teen saw no point in correcting him. "All right, I'll tell you everything. It was Scar. He told us to kill the cub the first time. He said he'd lure him to the elephant graveyard so we could kill him, but that didn't work when you came for your cub. So Scar then told us to attack the wildebeest to make them stampede. He said that it'd look like an accident, and no one would suspect. That's the truth. I swear, just please don't kill me or send me to the black pit," she confessed as she covered her head with her paws. "How do I know you aren't lying to save your hide?" Mufasa growled questioningly, glaring down at as he slammed a massive paw just inches from her face with his claws on full display, earning some blubbering noises from her. Dad, I think she's telling the truth," Simba spoke as he nudged his father, earning odd looks from him, the ninja and his childhood friend. "Why, what makes you believe her?" Naruto asked out of curiosity, getting the feeling that the cub had a reason to believe so, otherwise he wouldn't have said anything. "Because it was Uncle Scar that told me about the elephant graveyard in the first place, and today he brought me to this gorge and said there was some big surprise waiting for me," the cub responded, earning a wide-eyed expression from the king. "Scar told you?" "He never said anything about the elephant graveyard being the domain of the hyenas," Mufasa asked, making his cub shake his head negatively, confirming the fact that Scar deliberately put Simba in mortal danger. "I'll be damned. The bastard led Simba here so that you would be baited into rescuing him from the herd, only to die in the attempt. With you and your heir out of the way, he'd be king. Isn't that right?" Naruto asked, quickly piecing together the scheme Scar had planned, his question earning a stiff nod from the crimson-maned lion. "And what did Scar promise you in exchange for your help?" the king asked the hyena. Although he already had a good idea as to what was promised, he had to confirm it. "The Pride Lands." Scar said that if we made him king, we could roam and hunt on the Pride Lands whenever and wherever we wanted. We could even stay at Pride Rock, she replied swiftly, her answer actually being something the king hadn't suspected. Mufasa thought that perhaps they were offered some hunting grounds or something, but the entirety of the Pride Lands and his own home no less, that was too far. "What is your name, hyena?" the king asked with a small snarl, the female gulping nervously as she stuttered the name Shenzi. "Then Shenzi, we shall bring you to Pride Rock for judgment. Since you have been cooperative, your life shall be spared. But you will still be punished for colluding with Scar. If you try to escape, you will be hunted down and killed. Is that clear?" Mufasa asked, making Shenzi quickly nod her head, looking almost relieved that she wasn't going to be killed. "Don't worry about her running. I got just the thing." Naruto spoke as he reached into his ninja tool pouch and pulled out some wire. He then grabbed her legs and quickly bound them nice and tight, earning a pained yelp from the spotted hyena. Hey, take it easy with that hurts," she yelled out, cringing as she slowly lost feeling in her paws. "It's supposed to hurt, dummy. The point is to have it nice and tight so you can't bolt. Now to ensure you can't bite," he replied bluntly and wrapped some of the wire around her muzzle so that she couldn't try and attack him, all for the sake of safety precautions and all that good stuff. With a sigh, the blonde lifted her up, placing his head in the space of her legs and belly and kept her on his shoulders. "Sorry, Nala. No ride for you till we get this all sorted out," he apologized, making the lioness cub nod in understanding. "Nala, get on my back with Simba. We'll be able to go faster that way. Scar still thinks we're ignorant of his plans. We must cut off the head of the serpent immediately before he tries something else." The king spoke as the two cubs steadied themselves on his back, ready for the ride back to Pride Rock. "Hey Dad," Naruto called Uncle Scar a bastard. "What's a bastard?" Simba asked out of curiosity, wondering what it meant for the human to have called his wood murderer that. "Somebody who should not have been born." Mufasa replied to his son, growling angrily at the ultimate betrayal. The betrayal of a loved one. And very soon, said bastard would be held accountable for his sins, to be swiftly punished so that he may never again try to bring harm to Simba or the Pride Lands. As king, and more importantly as a father, Mufasa would see to it himself. "Are you all right there, Naruto?" It was somewhat of a trek. The king asked out of concern as the lad was huffing and puffing slightly, sweat dripping down his body as he dumped Shenzi to the ground, making her glare up at him for the rough treatment. "Yup, just need a minute to catch my breath. You go on ahead, I'll keep our eyewitness here while you put old Scar on the spot. Give me a holler whenever you're ready for us," the blonde replied, giving Mufasa a small wink. The crimson maned lion then smirked slightly, seeing what the boy was getting at, so he padded along towards the flats where the lionesses were waiting. Scar was there too, and it was plain to see from the look in his eyes he was trying not to show his fury at his failure. Both Seraphina and Sarabi were pleased to see their cubs return home safely, deeply nuzzling their children while crying some tears of joy. It was then that Zazu spoke. "I am pleased to see you return, your majesty, along with the cubs, but where is Mr. Naruto? Was he not with you?" "Yes, where is the human?" Scar asked in fake concern, though if Mufasa had to warrant, I guess the schemer was fishing for a consolation prize. "He'll be along shortly. I have to ask you, Scar, what was the big surprise you had planned for my son?" the king asked, his face a hardened mask as he stared down his brother. The black maned lion's eyes fed between Simba and the king quite nervously for a moment before he regained his composure. "Ah yes, that surprise. I was going to show him the wildebeest herd once I had gotten you, then I wanted to show him how two lions really hunt. Maybe treat him to some fresh wildebeest meat." He lied smoothly, all the while the lionesses watched in silent curiosity, wondering what was happening between the two brothers. "Really, how convenient. So then, if you left my son in the ravine to come get me, how did you know of the stampede?" Mufasa asked, his question catching his brother off guard and exposing his lie. Scar's voice stuck in his throat, making some small choking sounds as he tried to come up with an excuse. "No answer? Then how about the fact you failed to warn my son the hyenas lived in the elephant graveyard?" Mufasa growled as he stalked closer to his brother, slowly backing him into a corner. At these questions, the lionesses began to heatedly glare at Scar as they started to surround him, cutting off any chance of escape he may attempt. "Admit your guilt. You wanted my son to die both times to extinguish my line, but the stampede was meant to snuff out my life as I attempted to save Simba. With both of us dead and gone, you would be the new king." Mufasa flat out accused, now painting his brother as a traitor and attempted murderer in front of the whole pride. Scar cleared his throat and regained his composure, letting out a chuckle as he spoke in his charming voice. "Quite a tale you've spun, brother. But, unless I have the power to be in two places at once, it'd be impossible for me to frighten the wildebeest herd and fetch you at the same time. And I had no reason to believe that Simba would actually go to the graveyard since it was quite a good distance from Pride Rock. Lie all you want, Scar. It only deepens your guilt, especially since we received a confession." "Naruto," the king roared, summoning the human forth. The black maned lion's face then fell as he muttered questioningly, "Confession." After a few moments, Naruto appeared, dragging along Shenzi, who was busy grunting in pain as the boy deposited her to the ground in front of the pride. He then slipped off the wires around her muzzle and spoke to her with a triumphant tone. "Go on, Shenzi, tell everyone what you told us." With a nod, she began to tell the pride about all of Scar's machinations and dealings, completely exposing the truth for all to hear, and then made sure to announce that Mufasa had promised to spare her life in case he tried to back out of that oath. Her confession, combined with the open-mouthed expression on Scar's face, was all that was needed to finalize his guilt. "Scar, for your crimes, I disown you from my family, from our pride, and from our very species. In my eyes, you are no longer even a lion, much less a brother. You shall be taken to the black pits to die beneath the sun." "Have you any final words?" the king spoke, his voice now blank and emotionless, though his eyes showed a semblance of sadness. He had a duty to his cub, to his pride, and as king. "Zira, help me, one of our cubs," Scar shouted out towards the lioness, making her back slowly away as her pride sisters all looked at her upon realization that she was carrying the cub of a traitor. They gazed at her as though she were now a stange insect, unsure if they should crush her for fear of her being poisonous or to let her be to crawl away into some dark hole. "And now you care now that I can be useful, you care in the hopes this cub may save your life. You're not worth it, you're a horrible, horrible creature," Zira shouted angrily, then stormed off into the den of Pride Rock to escape the stares of the other lionesses. "A vain attempt doomed to failure. Trying to use your unborn cub to preserve your life, you shame yourself ever further. Lionesses, take him away and put him under guard. Come dawn, he goes to the black pits." The king spoke in a bitter tone, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and fury as his former brother was led away by a group of lionesses. With a roar of fury, the traitor attempted to flee and escape his fate. He didn't get very far as his guards quickly overtook and trapped him. "Need a little help, ladies?" Naruto asked as he held up more wire and used it to bind Scar's legs, preventing him from further escape attempts. With that done, the black maned lion was dragged away to a more secluded area until it was time for his punishment. The ninja in training looked over his shoulder and saw Mufasa walking away, obviously wishing to be alone right now. Understandable, since he nearly lost his son, and now lost a brother who was nothing but a murderous traitor. "Being king isn't always easy, is it?" Naruto asked, glancing out of the corner of his eye and noticing that Sarabi was sitting next to him, watching her mate leaving for privacy. "No, it is not. As king and a father, he must protect his family and his pride. If he let Scar go free because of their bond as brothers, then Scar may have one day returned and possibly succeed in another plot of some sort. She explained in a simplistic manner, informing the boy of the consequences of what happens when a leader doesn't maintain law and order in their kingdom. You know, for the longest time, I wanted to be the Hokage of my village. That's what we call our king. I wanted to be Hokage because I wanted to be recognized, respected, and treated like somebody important. To be honest, I never really thought about what it really meant to be a king. Now, after all that's happened here, I think I have a better idea now. It makes me question what I really want to do in my future, he explained as he sat down on the ground, hugging his knees to as he called into question his dream of being his village's Hokage. Let me share with you some advice. Being the leader of your homeland is an admirable goal, but to be a leader or a king means that you shall be the one others rely on. They shall come to you, hoping for your help. Others will covet your power and position, as you have witnessed between Scar and Mufasa. If you ever become the leader of something, you must surround yourself with only the faithful and loyal, those whom you can trust and shall trust you in return unconditionally. But be warned that to be a king means that you shall face difficult choices and dilemmas, and you won't always be ready for them. She cautioned him in a gentle tone, nuzzling his shoulder with a small smile. Thanks, Sarabi. That helps a bit. One of these days I'll figure out for myself whether I want to be a leader or not. But I don't think that's going to happen for a long while, he responded and scratched behind her ears, making her purr deeply in her throat. He then looked towards the den that Zira vanished into, wondering what might become of her. What'll happen to Zira? She was Scar's mate, right? He asked, a bit out of concern, frowning at the fact she might become an outcast within the Pride. Nothing good. According to our laws, if a traitor to the Pride sires a cub, then that cub is killed to prevent it from seeking revenge for its parent. If Zira conspired with her mate, she faces exile. If she is innocent, she will be forced to surrender her cub once it is born. Should she refuse, she'll be exiled anyway, Sarabi explained in a somber tone. As a mother herself, she knew it was a truly cruel thing to ask someone to give up their child. That's one of the biggest loads of shit I have ever heard. Why the hell should Zira's cub be punished for something it hasn't even done? That's not fair, Naruto growled as he stopped petting the lioness and stood to his feet, his hands clenched tightly together. Indeed, old laws like that are never truly fair. The cub need not even know the truth of its sire, if you ask me. Although if a male crazy enough were to claim Zira and her cub as his own to take away from Pride Rock when she is to be judged, it would solve a very large number of problems. Sarabi spoke with a smile gracing her face, a small wink being directed towards the human. Taking this new piece of advice to heart, he gave a nod of understanding. What about her? He asked, pointing towards Shenzi, who was busy trying to chew through the wiring binding her legs, only to whimper from the metal wires, causing pain to her teeth and gums. Usually death. But if the king promised to spare her, then another punishment must be chosen. Perhaps you could aid in that decision, she proposed, earning another nod from the blonde. I'll see what I can do. Till then, I'll be keeping an eye on her till Mufasa's ready. And Sarabi, thanks for all the advice. It really helps. He spoke and patted her head in thanks. She merely smiled, since even leaders occasionally needed someone to speak to about their problems, and since she was the queen, she was often her mate's confidant. The blonde brushed off some dirt on his clothes and approached the bound hyena, almost smirking at her current misery. You won't be chewing through that anytime soon. You'll only succeed in cutting up your gums. May as well give it a rest there. He spoke in an almost mocking tone of voice. You just wait. Once I get free, I'll be sure to get some sweet and juicy revenge on you, she replied angrily, her fur standing on end as she showed off her teeth. Watch what you say. Wouldn't want the lions to think you were a threat or anything and then give them a reason to kill you, he warned her mockingly, although the threat was indeed very real. She clamped her mouth shut, then sank into the ground in defeat, although she still grumbled under her breath a bit. That's better. All right then, upsadaisy. He spoke and lifted her up onto his shoulders, carrying her to his campsite to ensure she wouldn't be inconveniencing the lionesses anytime soon. After a short walk, he deposited her back onto the ground close to the remains of his campfire, which was now nothing but ash and some remnants of twigs left to smolder. With a sigh, he used a kunai to cut off a portion of meat that the lionesses had given him earlier, then tossed it to the captive hyena. Here, was all the blonde spoke as he began working to build up a new fire to cook his own food. Wait, you're actually feeding me? What for? Shenzi asked in surprise, since it was the first time that anyone had actually offered her food before. You might be a prisoner, but I don't think you really deserve to starve to death unless of course you had some personal desire to murder an innocent cub, the blonde asked with a heated glare, his hand gripping tightly around his kunai as he felt the urge to stab out one of her eyes should that be the case. Why no, I had nothing against the brat, okay, I was just following orders. Blame Mufasa for what happened, you hairless primate, she yelled while uselessly kicking her bound legs. What's the king got to do with that then? What's your problem with him? The blonde asked, as he placed some fresh wood he scavenged into his makeshift fire pit, and began striking together his flint to help start up a fire. It's because of the king and his lionesses that me and my pack are stuck in the elephant graveyard, barely scratching off a living as scavengers were always frickin' hungry with Scar in charge. We could have had as much food as we wanted, she complained, growling in disdain towards the lions off in the distance. Oh yeah, you could have asked Mufasa all nicely for a hunting ground or something. Heck, you could have found someplace else to live, somewhere away from the Pride Lands and Mufasa's territory. It's not like the Pride Lands is the entirety of the world, you know. There's bound to be a better place for you and your pack somewhere out there. Naruto scolded her as though he were talking to an idiot. Her jaw dropped at this, making her head dip towards the ground as she mumbled to herself about not having thought of that before. Okay, fine. You make a good point, I guess. It's just never mind, I doubt you'd really get it. She spoke in a tone of utter defeat, turning her head away from the human. Let me guess, you're tired of being an outcast, of being looked down on, so you want to get one over on those you believe to be oppressing you, the blonde asked in a rather perceptive manner, making his prisoner turn towards him with widened eyes. How do you know that? She asked him, surprised that he picked up on her feelings so easily. Takes an outcast to know an outcast. Don't think you're the only one to be suffering in the world. I had no parents and had to pretty much take care of myself my whole life. Adults would always avoid me like a plague and tell their kids to do the same. And there's this one guy I feel I could possibly be friends with named Sasuke, who has or at least had everything I could want, but he lost some of those things and wasn't even grateful for the time he had with them. So now he acts like an asshole to everybody and views himself as superior or something. He seems to take a particular liking in putting me down too, if only to make himself feel better, so that whole friends notion got shot down pretty quick. So yeah, I kinda do get it, he explained in a matter-of-fact tone, crossing his arms at Shenzi with a small scowl on his face. Wow, you really had it rough, huh? She asked him, getting a better understanding of the human, and began to feel a certain kinship to him. What did you do about it then? She asked, referring to how he handled his status as a fellow pariah. Well, people label me before getting to know me, so I guess I do my best to beat their low expectations and show that I'm more than what they think of me. That way, I suppose I'm telling them off for underestimating me. That makes sense? He asked at the end, wondering if he explained in a way she could understand. Yeah, kinda does. Maybe I'll try that. See where it goes from there. She replied with a small smile, then began nibbling on the meat he had given her earlier to help calm her growling stomach. By the way, what about your buddies? There were 2 other hyenas with you. Want to go back and bury them or something? He asked her, remembering the 2 bodies lying where he and the others had found her earlier in the gorge. Buddies? Oh, you mean Banzai and Ed? Sure, we hanged out and had a few laughs together, but we weren't really friends. More like partners in crime, she replied while shaking her head. Oh, for some reason that makes more sense to me. I just thought you were close to them since you were crying for them. He spoke with a shrug of his shoulders as he roasted some meat over his new fire. No. I was crying next to them, not for them. I had just survived that wildebeest stampede and watched as they got trampled just inches from my face. Then I realized that could have been me, she explained to the human. Oh, I get it. You were in shock at your own survival. So there was no real emotional investment or attachment to those guys? Naruto asked as he turned the meat over to roast it more evenly. Nope, was her only reply, along with a small scoff of dismissal. The 2 then ate in a much more comfortable silence, a large amount of animosity quickly vanishing as they bonded together, realizing that they were a bit more alike than one may think. The next morning, dawn had arrived with the sun barely peeking over the horizon, and the entire pride had gathered for the judgment of both Zira and Shenzi. According to Sarabi, once they had been dealt with, Scar would then be taken to his death. To Naruto's knowledge, he supposed that it was a process of elimination and tying up loose ends. The blonde himself sat next to the queen and king, since he himself was a witness and a guest of honor for saving the life of Simba, with the prince sitting in the human's lap. To the side, Scar himself was under heavy guard by his Suntobe executioners, but thanks to the wire around his legs, cutting off the flow and preventing him from running thanks to Naruto's skills with knots and properly tying off the wire. Skills he had attained from hunting in the Forest of Death when he was low on funds. But that was just extra details at this point. There were more important matters at hand. Zira, after an investigation conducted by Zazu amongst the lionesses, I find you innocent of any involvement in Scar's plot. But according to the old laws, I ask you now, when your cub is born, will you surrender it or will you accept exile? Mufasa spoke in a tone of authority, his face impassive and utterly devoid of emotion as he needed to maintain appearances. It was at this point that Sarabi nudged the blonde boy in the ribs, reminding him of her earlier advice. With a subtle nod, the whiskered teen raised his hand and spoke. She doesn't need to. I'll take her and the cub with me out of the Pride Lands. After he had uttered those words, a long silence filled the area. Then the lionesses began whispering amongst themselves at how bold the boy was for what he was trying to do. Many of their hearts were warmed by this man cub trying to help Zira and her unborn cub. The lioness in question herself, having a wide-eyed expression on her face, her mouth agape and almost seemingly ready to invite a fly inside. It was as though she had fainted on her feet. Very well then, Zira shall be in the care of our guest, but should she return with her cub, then we shall have no choice than to put it to death. Bring the hyena, called Shenzi. Mufasa spoke as a pair of lionesses pushed Zira to the side, who seemed to be mindlessly stumbling around like some kind of undead creature, still in shock at the man-cub's kindness. Shenzi, however, was roughly shoved into view of the entire pride, and she quickly curled herself into a, trying to look as meek and non-threatening as she could, lest she invoke the wrath of the lionesses. Shenzi, as promised, your life shall be spared. But you are hereby exiled forever from the Pride Lands. Should you ever return, then you will be hunted down and killed on sight. "Naruto, I trust you shall find a suitable place for her," the king asked, having a feeling the boy was planning on taking the hyena with him. The blonde man kept nodding in confirmation, seemingly taking it upon himself to save these poor creatures out of the goodness of his own heart. "Very good. Now that the others have been properly judged, it is time to end this. Take Scar to the black pits. See to it that he dies a slow and painful death as he so deserves. Young Naruto, would you accompany the lionesses to ensure the process goes smoothly? There is something you can help with that the lionesses cannot," the king asked, knowing that the man cub had proven himself quite reliable. "After what that prick tried to pull, I'd be happy to," the blonde replied as he slowly got up, letting Simba jump out of his lap. After giving the cub a quick ear scratching, he followed the group of lionesses who were dragging Scar away. And they weren't even bothering to be gentle as they deliberately dragged him across some obviously sharp rocks and pebbles. The black maned lion protested angrily and desperately kicked his bound legs, which made for a rather pathetic sight. Then Scar started hurling petty insults to the lionesses, which earned him several hard kicks to his back from Naruto, which quickly shut him up. After some time, with the traitor's options exhausted, he began to weep uncontrollably, which was possibly the most pathetic thing that his captors had ever seen. At long last, they arrived at their intended destination. A large pond-sized pit filled with nothing but a black substance was waiting there. Some skulls and skeletons of past victims being visible above the surface, a truly grim sight and a reminder to passerbys what will happen if they were to commit an unforgivable crime within the Pride Lands. "Naruto, could you help us with this?" Nala's mother Seraphina asked, as she and another Pride sister pulled a long vine out from nearby tree and handed one end to him. The blonde quickly noticing a look of terror on Scar's face as he started to hyperventilate. "What's the vine for?" he asked, though for some reason he already had a decent idea. But he had to be sure that he was using it for its intended purpose. "Usually, Rafiki would do this for us, but the king requested for you specifically. Tie one end of the vine into a noose to put around Scar's neck, then climb up into the tree, very carefully, and put it over a sturdy limb for us to pull. It will keep Scar's head above the surface of the pits and keep him from dying prematurely. As you may guess, we cannot tie it ourselves," Seraphina explained, noting their lack of opposable thumbs. "Wow, you guys don't do anything half-assed, huh? Then again, a quick death would probably be too big a kindness for this piece of shit," the blonde replied as he began tying off the needed noose and then placed it around the prisoner's neck. With that part done, the whiskered teen took a breath and scurried up into the tree, thankful to his forest of death training that made him very proficient at climbing. After slipping the rest of the vine over the needed limb, he climbed back down and joined a pair of lionesses who took their end of the vine within their mouths and began to pull. The man cub assisting them as Scar was dragged into the black pits, his body entering with a wet sploop sound, the tar immediately sticking to his fur and body, which made it pretty difficult to drag him in. Finally, they managed to get him far enough away from solid ground to ensure he wouldn't be able to escape. Naruto tied the free end of the vine around an exposed tree root that Seraphina pointed out, to make sure that Scar didn't try to dip his head beneath the surface. Once all was said and done, the blonde realized that he was now responsible for the slow demise of another living creature, and he didn't even feel bad about it. But then he recalled how Scar attempted to murder Simba twice over, making it obvious why he felt no remorse for this. Though he didn't take any joy from it either. If he did, then he'd be worried about his mental stability. "So what happens now?" the blonde asked with a shrug, unsure of where things were meant to go from here. He hadn't even made any progress in finding a way back home to Konoha. "A lioness shall pass by here daily to make sure that Scar hasn't escaped. It is highly unlikely, but we can't be too careful," Seraphina answered him as she and her Pride sisters padded off, with the whiskered teen following close behind with his hands loosely clasped behind his head. The lionesses stopped and tensed up as the sky above darkened. Behind them, Scar was shouting angrily while a dark aura surrounded what was visible of his body. "It should have been me. I should be king. I should rule the Pride Lands, Mufasa, and that brat should have died in that gorge. I will be king. The Pride Lands are mine." Scar roared angrily as he shook his head violently, the noose around his neck snapping, which caused him to fully sink into the tar pit. In Naruto's mind, that should have been the end of the traitor, but warning bells kept ringing inside of his head. Run away, danger, danger coming," the blonde shouted as he sprinted away, with the lionesses following close behind him since they too sensed something wrong. A loud crash was heard as an explosion of rock, tar, and gravel showered the area, making them turn to see what had happened. They all stared in horror as the form of a tar-covered Scar emerged, and inky black aura surrounded him. His body decorated with bones of past victims, with a wild beast skull decorating his head and acting as a kind of helmet, making for a very intimidating sight. Beneath his paws, a whirlpool of darkness formed and strange imp-like creatures began to climb out, their eyes glowing a pale yellow as they followed behind the lion. "What were those creatures? How did Scar summon them?" a lioness asked as they backed away, trying to maintain their distance from this new phenomena. "No idea. We gotta go now," Naruto shouted as he and the Pride sisters ran towards Pride Rock to alert the king and all the others of what was transpiring. Meanwhile, in the distance, standing atop a hill, two figures were watching events unfold. They were dressed in black and their hoods hid their faces, but one of them pulled their hood back, revealing a man with spiky crimson hair. "Seems things are getting pretty interesting now. I'm curious, was it the kid that allowed darkness to creep into this realm? What do you think, Zero?" he asked his partner, who was busy looking through a telescope. Darkness is never that far away. Where there's light, darkness shall exist. And vice versa, it is a never-ending and symbiotic relationship. The brighter the light, the longer the shadow, the deeper the dark, the brighter the light. Scar already held it in his heart, but his plans were thwarted, and it seems the darkness claimed his heart when he was met with his own end. That boy was not the cause, necessarily, but he was a catalyst of sorts. That child possibly has one of the most dangerous powers of all to defy and manipulate the very course of fate itself. The one called Zero answered in a philosophical manner, almost chuckling in amusement. No kidding. So what's the play then, boss? You want to lend the kid a hand? He's kind of out of his depth. The crimson-haired man asked with a small smirk as he pulled out a bladed ring, with bits of fire emerging from the weapon. No, not just yet, Axel. Let's wait a bit longer before we do anything. I have a good feeling about this one, Zira replied as a row of teeth became visible beneath the hood, showing a toothy grin. Your call then, boss, Axel replied as he put away his weapon, a smirk forming on his face as he desired to see things continue to escalate. It would prove to be an interesting spectacle to say the least. Meanwhile, Kingdom Hearts Library. Everyone big trouble disaster, the form of Riku shouted as she flew about the library in search of her fellow Gullwings. Her two friends, Yuna and Pain, appearing, with the latter having a sour expression. Although Yuna seemed more concerned and was hoping that nothing else had happened, but that didn't seem to be the case. Come quick, there's something wrong with the Lion King, the blonde fairy shouted as she flew down into the hidden vault containing the realm's storybooks. Her partners chased after her and gaped in horror, seeing that the Lion King, the realm of the Pride Lands, was now covered in a black aura. This could only mean one thing: the Heartless had creeped into the Pride Lands, and it was a strong possibility that the boy from earlier was likely in there somewhere. We have to get Master Aqua immediately. She'll handle this. She's currently in Wonderland. Pain, go fetch the master and tell her what's happening. Me and Riku will scout the Pride Lands to better determine the situation. Yuna spoke, taking on a role of leadership during this crisis. The silver-haired fairy nodded and went towards a book labeled Alice in Wonderland before vanishing into it, leaving both Yuna and Riku to make their way into the Pride Lands. Hopefully it wouldn't be too late to undo any damage the Heartless may cause. They also silently hoped that the boy from earlier wasn't responsible for this. But for now, they needed more information since it'd be dangerous for their Master Aqua to go in blind. At Pride Rock, dear spirits, it seems like the end of all things out there, spoke the form of Zazu as he and the entire Pride saw the creeping darkness on the horizon, swallowing all things in its wake. Naruto and the other lionesses were now visible in the distance, running towards Pride Rock with all haste. Mufasa's eyes narrowed as he wondered what form of magic could cause this. He then turned to the lionesses and spoke in a tone of authority. Get the cubs into the den, get every available lioness, and prepare yourselves. Zazu, fly as fast as your wings can carry you and get any of our lionesses that are out on the hunt. We'll need every claw and tooth, for I sense that we'll be in for a fight, the king stated, prompting his aide to nod and fly off into the distance, the Pride sisters taking positions around Pride Rock as Sarabi took the cubs inside the den for their safety. After a few more moments, the king was greeted by the forms of the Mancub and his group, who were now wheezing as they tried to catch their breath. What's happening out there? What is that darkness? Mufasa asked, hoping to learn more of how or why this was now happening. The blonde teen raised up a hand as he finally caught his breath and began to explain the situation. He started with how things were, at first, going smoothly with Scar being dragged into the black pits. Then something happened as the lion was now using a power that they had no knowledge of. And worse, strange black creatures were now following Scar as if he were some type of a leader figure. The king was unsure of what to make of this account, but the lionesses and even Seraphina all confirmed it to be true. With any luck, Rafiki would now be on his way to provide his advice of the situation. Until such time, they would need to hold out. In the background, Naruto watched as what could best be described as a black hole started to open into the sky. His hands now in a white-knuckle grip as he cursed himself for his own powerlessness. If only he were stronger, then he would be of better help. But what could he do against this unknown to him? The answer thrummed deeply inside of his and his own heart. Where am I now? Asked the form of Naruto Uzumaki in apparent confusion, his eyes scanning the environment only to find nothing but a pitch-black void in all directions. However, at his feet seemed to be a circle of colored glass depicting a horned woman with green skin, a staff in hand with a raven on her shoulder, gazing at a princess with golden hair who seemed to be in a deep sleep. As he cautiously stepped closer towards the center, he heard a deep booming voice echo all around him. What is it that you seek? The voice asked him, causing the boy to search in all directions for the source but couldn't find it amidst the endless darkness. After a few moments, the voice repeated the question again. Naruto crossed his arms over his and contemplated the question. After seeing the responsibility and weight of being a leader like Mufasa, the boy was no longer certain that he desired to be Hokage. Even if he were to be the village leader, he would likely be faced with deception and betrayal. And he was nowhere near ready to face such trials, but there was something that he desired that he needed much more than respect or authority. I seek power. I need to be strong. I need to be much stronger if I'm to protect my friends and myself from danger. I don't want to be a piece of deadweight that can only talk big and scream about becoming Hokage or believe it. He shouted loud out into the void, clenching his fists into a white-knuckle grip. To gain something, you must be willing to sacrifice as well. Are you prepared to sacrifice for the sake of gaining power even if it means surrendering your dream? The voice asked him, making the boy grit his teeth and shake his head in dismay, having already made up his mind. To hell with being Hawkeye, I saw firsthand what it means to be a leader. It's not all about respect and authority. It's about making the hard choices, about doing what's best for everyone, about doing things to keep your friends and family safe. And I don't think that I'm ready for that kind of responsibility just yet. I just wanted to be the Hawkeye because I wanted to be respected and to show up all those people who looked down on or mocked me, but now my friends are in danger. So I need the power to protect them, he shouted and stomped his foot down, the glass beneath him cracking beneath him, which made him gulp a bit. Very well. Then the power you desire is yours to take, the voice answered, and then the floor beneath the boy exploded beneath him in shards of colored glass as he fell down into the void, until all went white. Pride Rock, evening time. With a startled gasp, the blonde's eyes snapped open as he awoke from his dreams and found himself in a cold sweat. He looked around and was relieved to find himself where he belonged. His back was propped up against Sarabi's warm body with Mufasa's face just inches from her own. The cubs Simba and Nala were both sleeping next to the blonde's legs, and all the other lionesses were asleep in a mass of bodies to keep each other warm in the cold night. Off to the side was Shenzi, who seemed to be cackling in her sleep, her bound legs moving around as if she were chasing something, making for a somewhat cute sight. Then he noticed a lone lioness sitting out in the den's doorway, gazing out towards the plains. Growing curious, the whiskered teen slowly got up and carefully tiptoed around the lionesses to avoid waking anyone up. Fortunately, it seemed that they were all heavy sleepers, since they didn't seem to even acknowledge his awkward steps. After finally clearing the sleeping pride sisters, he walked up to the den's entryway and found the lioness, who was still awake, to be Zira, blankly staring out across the pride lands. Can't sleep? How, you having weird dreams too, or did you volunteer for guard duty? He asked her in a friendly voice, earning a low growl from her, making him wince slightly. It seems like she would still act hostile to him, even after he had tried to save her unborn cub. He thought about what little he knew of Zira, how she briefly mentioned being toxic to others, how Nala mentioned that she was cranky and mean all the time, and how Scar had treated her. In some ways it kind of reminded him of somebody else that was always rude to others for no apparent reason other than to simply be an asshole. I think I figured out what your problem is, Zira. I know somebody that, like you, is always mean to those around him. He does it because he thinks that he doesn't need anybody and can do everything for himself, by himself, and that nobody else matters except himself. I think it's because you're hurting. Deep down, there's this big gaping hole in your heart. You thought maybe Scar could fill it up, but instead he took advantage of a sad and lonely lioness' pain and betrayed your trust. But you stuck with him, hoping that it'd get better. And you push others away because you're scared of being hurt again, so you lash out and behave in a hostile manner to protect yourself. That about right? He spoke with a small smile, and noticed that her eyes fed towards his direction and her body had tensed up, signaling that he'd hit the nail on the head. He slowly reached forward to scratch her behind the ears, but his hand was swatted away by her paw, making him yelp painfully. He quickly turned around to see if he'd accidentally startled any of the sleeping Pride members, but they were still fast asleep, making him sigh in relief. Don't you dare touch me, Zira growled as she stared out across the landscape. Even in the dead of night, the all-consuming darkness was there and slowly creeping upon Pride Rock, and the black hole in the sky also seemed to be expanding, as though it were preparing to swallow up the world around them. Why is Scar taking his sweet time in getting here? She growled as she impatiently tapped her claws against the stone floor. It'd be psychological warfare, the blonde answered plainly as he sat down next to her and crossed his legs, his statement earning a confused look from the lioness, meaning she questioned him in an irritated voice, the corner of her mouth twitching in annoyance. Mind games. He's not attacking us just yet because he wants to put us on edge, get us riled up, and then he'll attack when we let our guard down or something. Seems Mufasa already saw through that though, the whiskered teen replied while jabbing a thumb in the direction of the sleeping Pride members, earning a quiet "oh" from Zira. She briefly huffed as she dragged a claw across the ground with a sour look on her face. Why did you do it? Why claim me and my cub? That is what's keeping me awake. I have been asking myself that over and over, and I can't begin to fathom why you would do such a crazy thing since you have nothing obvious to gain. I would have been fine with being exiled, she asked him with a sneer, her teeth flashing in the dimmed moonlight. I dunno. Out of the goodness of my heart, it seemed like the right thing to do at the time, and Sarabi suggested it. Said it would help solve some problems. I thought about maybe taking you and Shenzi back home with me, give you a place to stay instead of wandering out in the wilderness where anything could happen to you. He replied honestly, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly, and then found himself pinned beneath Zira, who was snarling ferociously. You can't be serious. That's it because it was the right thing. Are you mocking me? No one is that selfless. No one, she growled out deeply in her throat, her eyes blazing with fury, giving them a shot and almost demonic appearance. I am serious, and you'd be surprised. Maybe you haven't experienced much in the ways of kindness or compassion, but that doesn't mean you should give up hope. There are good people out there, even if they can sometimes be hard to find. He replied in a calm tone that surprised even himself as he gently pushed the lioness off of him. She offered little resistance as her face was completely dumbstruck by his words. She then shook off her stupor and replied in a bitter tone, you're wrong. Good people don't exist. I thought as you did once, but it's all a myth. Hope, faith, goodwill, it's all just pretty little words people use to make themselves feel better in a harsh and cruel, unforgiving world. There's no such thing as goodness. The only meaningful thing in life is surviving and living to see past tomorrow. Creatures like you, with your beliefs in the good of others, you all sicken me." With those words she started to pad off, but her tail was gently pulled by the blonde, causing her to wheel around and give him a warning growl to let go. "What, you think I had it easy? I'm an orphan and I have absolute zero knowledge about who my family was. I don't know if they died, if they abandoned me, or had to give me up for some reason, and it's been eating me up inside for years. I had to take care of myself for the most part, and I had very few friends growing up. And at school, I am often picked on in my class because I keep messing up. So I do pranks to get attention, even if it means I get into trouble for it. But I never gave up on others, or lost my faith in others." "What about you? What's your story?" the blonde asked as he released her tail, his question earning a ferocious snarl from the lioness. "Fine, you want to know why this wasn't my original pride? I was born into one that lived outside the Pride lands, and you know what happened to us? Plague. Plague happened. It slowly ate up my friends and family from the city out, and there was nothing I could do but watch them suffer. I begged and pleaded to others for help, but they would turn me away, run in terror, or try to throw rocks at me for fear of catching the plague as well. You know what that's like to be powerless to help your loved ones. It wasn't until I was a young adult that I joined Mufasa's pride. The rest is history," Zira explained bitterly, grumbling angrily as she flexed her claws while the blonde listened to her brief story. However, he could tell that it was a past that has haunted her for a long time. "I don't know what that's like." "You're right about that. That's both my blessing and my curse. You may have lost your family, but you at least had them to lose in the first place. You must have some happy memories of them. I don't even know the reason my parents left me. A bad thing happened when you were a cub, and you haven't been able to move on. That kind of reminds of Sasuke too. He has never been able to heal from losing his clan and family, or maybe he doesn't even want to try and heal. But that doesn't mean you should give up on others. I mean, I'm helping you, aren't I?" he asked with a kind smile, earning some sputtering noises from the lioness as she tried to come up with some kind of argument to refute him. "Oh, for spirit's sake, find some other den to work out your issues, then hate mate with each other and get it over with," spoke the cranky form of Shenzi as she stared at the two with a look of anger. Obviously she wasn't as heavy a sleeper as the lions. "Hate mate, oh." Naruto spoke with a deep blush as he rubbed his arm with Zira following closely behind him as she stared at the ground to hide her discomfort, their little heart-to-heart moment being interrupted. "I'm not interested in cubs," Zira muttered out of spite as she sighed tiredly while rubbing her forehead. She stiffened up when she felt an alien feeling touch her from behind and then recognized it as the boy's fingers scratching behind her ears, earning a reluctant purring noise from her. "As I was saying, there are good people out there. Don't believe me? I'll prove you wrong myself." He spoke with a chuckle, earning a rueful laugh from the lioness. "I suppose, if nothing else, I can look forward to the day I can say I told you so," she answered with a mocking tone in her voice as the two seemed to laugh together. "Suwu, are you going to hate mate? It's not going to be gentle or loving, is it? It's going to be nasty and rough. Like it's the only kind of catharsis you can get without using violence, right?" Shenzi asked in a snarky tone, almost daring the two to go at it in the middle of the night. "Shut up, Shenzi, you're ruining the moment with your crass jokes," Naruto spoke as he half-heartedly tossed a pebble in the hyena's direction, which hit the wall above her, making her chuckle in amusement before trying to fall back asleep. It was going to be a long day tomorrow. Meanwhile, "Hey boss, look at what I found flying about," spoke the form of Axel as he held up a birdcage in his hand, the occupants inside being the Gullwings Yuna and Riku as they tried to reach for the lock, but to no avail since they couldn't get a good grip on the latch. The two of them muttering to each other why a pair of nobodies were in one of the realms. The hooded figure of Zero sat on a boulder, looking through a telescope towards Pride Rock, observing the forms of Naruto and Zira in the den's entryway. What seemed to be a hostile conversation seems to have eased into a more relaxed atmosphere. "You better let us go right now. Our master Aqua is a powerful Keyblade master, and she won't appreciate you treating her assistants like this," Riku shouted as she angrily stomped on the cage floor, earning a chuckle from Axel. Zero lowered the telescope and spoke in a flat tone of voice. "Master Aqua, the guardian of the realms. Interesting. The boy doesn't seem to have a Keyblade just yet, so he likely isn't Aqua's apprentice. Just what is he doing here? Please let us go. We have to report to Master Aqua about the Heartless before they swallow up this realm. If you release us, we won't tell her about you. I promise." And that boy stumbled upon the realm's storybooks and got Ed inside. "He's not even supposed to be here," Yuna pleaded, trying to reason with her and Riku's captors. The crimson-haired nobody chuckled a bit and asked, "What's the play then, boss? I thought our job was to observe the Heartless for a spell. But the way things are now, it's kinda boring seeing this world being swallowed up by the darkness. Think we should level the playing field a bit. Seems only fair to give them a fighting chance, right, Zero?" Zero's fingers tapped against the telescope a few times, a low sound being heard as the cloaked figure was in deep thought until finally the hooded nobody answered, "The current pace of things is much too idle and stale, but I may have a solution to that." The two nobodies then turned towards another cage with a warthog and Meerkat trapped inside as they trembled in terror. "Timon and Pumbaa, is it sorry for caging you, but you're fairly important to this realm. I'll make you a deal though. Me and my subordinate Axel will release you, and all you need to do in exchange is to take those fairies to Pride Rock," Zero offered, holding the key to their cage almost as if one would hold out a treat to a hungry animal. "Are you kidding, Pride Rock? But that's where the lions live. Why do you think it's called Pride Rock? Look, buddy, I don't know what your game is, but me and Pumbaa aren't about to be served up for dinner," spoke the form of Timon, with his warthog pal nodding in agreement since it was known lions ate warthogs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. "As you wish, though a word of advice, you are far more likely to find safety with the lions than out there," Zero replied, pointing towards the encroaching darkness that was slowly spreading across the plains. "You know, Timon, it might not be the best idea to go into a den of lions, but it'll be worse to take our chances with all those black things out there." Pumbaa spoke, offering his thoughts to his best friend. It didn't take long for his meerkat pal to quickly nod in agreement to this idea, albeit reluctantly. With a nod, the hooded nobody opened their cage and then placed the birdcage containing the fairies against Pumbaa's mouth to allow him to carry it. Once Timon climbed onto Pumbaa's back, a toothy smile could be seen in the shadows of Zero's hood. "Good choice. Allow me to help you get jump-started," the hooded figure spoke, and then the warthog felt a piercing pain in his backside, making him yell out in pain and start charging across the plains with a dust cloud trailing behind him. Well, this will be interesting. Hopefully we'll be able to see something entertaining," Axel spoke as he crossed his arms, a smirk forming on his face. "Agreed. It has been some time since the Heartless were this active. The only things I know that could draw them together in such great numbers would likely be a creature full of wickedness like Scar, or perhaps a Keyblade wielder. Either way, this will make for quite the show." Zira spoke with a chuckle and lifted up the telescope again to look through it to observe the warthog's progress in reaching Pride Rock. "Elsewhere, in Wonderland. Not here either, and still so many realms to cover. It'd be easier if I knew which realm he fell into," muttered the form of Aqua as she marched through the Queen's garden, the patrolling card guards ignoring her presence as she continued to search for the missing boy. All the while she cursed herself for this stupid mistake. For all these years she had kept the realm safe without any incident, and now because of her carelessness, a child had not only discovered the storybook vault, but accidentally ventured into a realm. Hopefully, he fell into a realm where he wouldn't be able to mess with the natural order too much. Still, her time disguised as a librarian had been so utterly quiet she had started to view it as a kind of semi-retirement. No Heartless had appeared either since the realms had all been sealed, and the only things she really needed to fight off were annoying and overly flirty guys like that creeper Urka. It should have come as no surprise that she became lazy and complacent and was now paying for it. But still, she could fix this. She just had to find the boy, erase his memories, and then this would all go away and she'd be much more aware of any lingering visitors to her library from here on. Master Aqua called a familiar voice as the form of the fairy Pain appeared, her hands on her knees as she panted heavily. The Keyblade Master raising an eyebrow and wondering why one of her assistants was in such a rush to find her. "What happened, Pain? Did that boy return to the library on his own somehow?" the Blue Net asked as she crossed her arms, waiting patiently as the silver-haired fairy started to get her second wind. It would be unlikely if he found a way back, but there was still a small chance. "No, we have an emergency. The Lion King is showing the presence of Heartless. You need to go to the Pride Lands and stop them immediately. Yuna and Riku are there to scout around and get a read on what's happening." Pain spoke, giving a brief report of the situation. Aqua gasped a bit in surprise, then adopted a thinking pose for a few moments. It was highly unlikely for a young child to possess enough darkness to lure out the Heartless. Something else must have happened to draw the Heartless out of hiding, such as an entity of pure evil finally becoming a Heartless itself. "I see. Chances are, our missing boy is there too. We must hurry before the Pride Lands are lost to us." Aqua spoke as she summoned her Keyblade in hand and tapped it against the ground, a sphere of light surrounding the two until they vanished out of existence. They'd need to hurry before it was too late to save the Pride Lands. Back at Pride Rock, early morning, the sun began to rise over the horizon, though its rays seemed to have dimmed with the blanket of darkness covering the sky and landscape, though it did provide the needed illumination. In Naruto's eyes, it seemed like the Pride Lands were now a sea of blackness that spread like a poison or like a cancer. The lionesses stood guard with visibly worried expressions. Obviously, they were all at a loss on what to do during times like these. Even the wise Mufasa was at a loss, and many lionesses were becoming increasingly worried since Zazu hadn't returned with any of their Pride sisters. Zira sat off to the side, occasionally giving the human boy odd looks and the occasional mocking smirk, though she didn't seem to have any real hostility to him at the moment. And Shenzi was currently at the mercy of the cubs Nala and Simba, who both seemed to be happy to tease and climb all over the spotted hyena and poke at her with their developing claws or pull on her ears or tail. According to them, it was payback for when she and her goon squad chased them back in the elephant graveyard and for causing the stampede. The hyena offered little resistance since she knew she kinda earned this, and she could have been worse off. Plus, if she tried to bite at the cubs, that might lead to the lions tossing her to those black creatures everyone was so afraid of. Still nothing. It seems as if Scar is just waiting for something to happen. Mufasa thought aloud as he paced in thought, wishing that he could consult Rafiki on the matter of those creatures, but the baboon was nowhere to be found. Had that darkness taken him like the landscape? Might have to do with that big hole in the sky. Back home, we call those things black holes. Some kind of cosmic force that can in all things, including light itself. Nothing can escape them once you get too close. Scar might be waiting for it to consume the Pride Lands. Naruto spoke, pointing towards the growing hole in the sky as he rested his body against Serafina's warm body, trying to stay relaxed and calm even in this dire situation. Makes sense in a way. If I had my way, we'd charge across the Pride Lands and take the fight to Scar directly, but we know nothing about the creatures he leads, nor do we know his current location, and I do not wish to endanger the lionesses. Mufasa replied thoughtfully, though it was easy to tell by how restless he was that he was thinking a mile a minute. Might come down to it though. During times like these, it may be impossible to get through without casualties, yet another grim responsibility of being king. The blonde boy responded with a sigh, earning a summer nod from the crimson-maned lion. As the king sat down with a frustrated sigh, a lioness came padding up to him and whispered something into his ear. The king's ears perked up, then a small smile formed on his face. It seems we have some visitors, and two of them seem to bear a striking resemblance to you, young Naruto. The king announced as a pair of lionesses escorted a warthog that had a meerkat riding his back, and in his mouth was a birdcage with two little fairies, one of which the blonde immediately recognized. Hey, should we bow or something? The meerkat spoke with a nervous chuckle, obviously feeling very intimidated by the presence of the predators, especially since they could likely swallow him down in one swift bite. The warthog placed down the birdcage and replied to his little friend, probably a good idea. We are in the presence of the king, I think. The meerkat immediately leapt down and dropped to his knees, placing his face against the ground with his arms stretched out in front of him. Oh please, your highness, we come to you in peace, please don't eat us. The various lions all chuckled in amusement. While they may be predators, they were far from savages, but it was still quite funny to see other animals grovel for their lives when they weren't in any real danger. Be at ease. We will not be eating you, though that may change if you were to cause trouble unto us. Mufasa replied in a half-joking and half-serious manner, flashing his teeth to emphasize both the joke and his point, earning a yelp from the meerkat and warthog pal. The king then cleared his throat and continued to speak in a more professional tone. Now then, who might you be, and what brings you to Pride Rock? Oh well, your highness, I am Pumbaa and this is my buddy Timon. We were kidnapped from our oasis by these two huge hairless monkeys that look suspiciously like him. The swine spoke as he pointed a hoof at Naruto, who had an eyebrow for a brief moment before reaching down to acquire the birdcage and sticking his finger inside to poke at the trapped fairies a bit, earning some giggles from them, indicating that they were likely ticklish. You said you came alone, correct? Sarabi asked as she and a number of lionesses had gathered out of interest and wanted to know more about these strangers. I did. Either they were already here before I was, or I dunno. Hey fellas, what did these two look like? The blonde asked, since he too was confused, since it had been believed that he was the only human in the Pride Lands. Well, one was called Axel and he had a spiky red mane on his head. The other was called Zero, but we never saw what that guy looked like. But that Zero was scary. They told us to come to Pride Rock and to bring those two along. The meerkat spoke as he pointed at the birdcage in the blonde's hands. With a low hum, the whiskered teen unlocked the cage door and allowed the fairies to fly free from their confinement. Hey there, good to see you again. Sorry for startling you before. The blonde-haired female spoke with a cute giggle. The blonde boy muttering an apology of his own since he had given chase to her, but what else was one supposed to do at the sight of a fairy? The brown-haired one bowed with a smile and then spoke. My name is Yuna, and this is my partner Riku. We are the assistants of our master Aqua, who runs the Kingdom Hearts library. It is a pleasure to meet you. After their introduction, Naruto's mind began to fill with a million different questions. Why was Aqua guarding a vault full of different worlds? Why were the worlds in the form of storybooks, to name a few? But for now he'd settle on a more pressing subject. Nice to meet you both. The name's Naruto Uzumaki. I guess you'd know that since I visit your library on a fairly regular basis. But on to more important things. What in the hell are those black creatures out there, and why are they suddenly following Scar's lead? The blonde asked, putting forth the question that had been on everyone's minds. Those creatures are called the Heartless, entities born from the darkness in people's hearts. Save for but a few exceptions, most everyone has darkness inside which can create them. Their basic instinct is to seek out and take the hearts of all things, but the hearts they seek out and covet most are the core or heart of a realm. Sometimes, a powerful enough entity can control the Heartless, especially if their hearts are filled with darkness, like Scar. However, he became a Heartless himself and is now likely seeking the consumption of this world as a means for revenge. Lee and my partner were looking around for information to aid our master. The strongest concentration of Heartless seems to be in a gorge where Scar is likely waiting. As soon as our master arrives, she'll be able to fix this by sealing away that black hole in the sky. Yuna explained and pointed up towards the sky, which now seemed to be pitch black and even the sun had now been blotted out. Something tells me that's going to be easier said than done, especially if there's an army of those things out there. In a gorge, that's where I ended up foiling his scheme to create an accident for Simba and Mufasa. Ironic, the blonde boy stated with a scowl as he crossed his arms. Agreed on both counts. How long will it be until your master arrives? The king asked, directing his question at the fairies. Our third partner Pain went to retrieve our master. It shouldn't be too much longer now, but I must suggest that we get to work in paving the way for her now. Defeating the Heartless form of Scar would make the lesser ones disorganized and confused for a brief amount of time, and then our master can seal the breach much more easily, Yuna explained, causing the king to take on a thinking pose as he considered his options. Naruto, what would you have me do? Mufasa asked, turning his attention to the boy who now had a look of surprise on his face when the king had asked for his opinion. You're asking me? I'm not exactly the most experienced when it comes to fighting or strategy. The boy spoke sheepishly as he rubbed the back of his head, earning a chuckle from the king. You haven't steered my wrong just yet. And a king can be often surprised by the thoughts and ideas of others. Go ahead, any ideas to be offered may be of help. Mufasa spoke with a smile, hoping that the man cub could once more rise to the occasion and be of aid. Well, we know where Scar is. We now know that someone will be coming to help us, but if we're going to fight through an army of Heartless, we're going to need some more backup, the boy mused out loud as he gazed eastward into empty space, his thinking being interrupted by the sounds of Shenzi laughing hysterically, prompting him to turn and see that she was being tickled by the cubs with twigs in their mouths, and no mercy was being shown as tears leaked from Shenzi's eyes as it was obvious she was in pain due to the lack of air in her lungs. Staring at this amusing scene, the blonde turned back towards the east and saw that the encroaching darkness hadn't yet claimed the elephant graveyard. An idea blinked inside his mind like a light bulb as he approached the giggling predator, her eyes almost begging him for help. Hey Nala, Simba, mind if I talk to Shenzi real quick? He asked, prompting the cubs to groan in disappointment, but they backed off for the moment, allowing the hyena a chance to win some much-needed air. Hey Shenzi, I'm no expert on hyenas, but I once learned something about how their packs can reach some pretty high numbers. Way I see it, since you helped expose Scar, even as a Heartless, he'll be more than happy to tear you to pieces. If you could gather up the hyena pack in the graveyard, that'd be a big help for us. And as a thank you during these dire times, I'm sure the king could arrange for some kind of reward, like a hunting ground. The blonde boy spoke with a smirk forming on his face, giving her a small wink. The hyena was stunned by this statement, but quickly mulled over her options, and there was only one clear option available. She'd have to help out the lions to save her own skin. If she didn't, then Scar would likely kill her either way. At least by helping she could potentially save herself, and maybe get something out of it. Sure, I can do it, just take these bindings off my legs and I'll start running there right now. She spoke up, wiggling her paws a bit as she was very eager to be able to move freely again. Not so fast. We're counting on your help. If you do not come to our aid, and we still manage to survive this, we shall hunt you down and dump you into the black pits with Scar. Mufasa spoke with a small snarl to prove his point. Well, you think I'm gonna skimp out or something? Scar's going to kill me regardless, and that kind of discrimination's why us hyenas have a bad rep. Where do we fit into your precious circle of life? Maybe we're tired of being some bottom-feeding scavengers. We gotta eat too, just like you. Why else would we side with Scar when he was offering us free reign over the Pride Lands? Shenzi shouted, finally having enough of being treated so poorly just because she was a hyena. The king was stunned into silence for a brief moment. His shoulders drooped down slightly as he thought about it. Since he had taken the throne from his father, he had tried his hardest to respect the old ways and to maintain the balance for the circle of life, although perhaps he had tried too hard. Perhaps it was the old ways that led to the animosity between lions and hyenas in the Pride Lands. The hyenas were living creatures as well that lived within the Pride Lands, and so they too had a place in the circle of life as well. I am sorry, was the king's reply, causing some startled gasps to be heard from the lionesses. Even Shenzi was surprised that the Lion King himself had apologized to her, a hyena of all creatures. Her mouth now hanging open and seemed almost ready to fall to the ground. You are right, perhaps it was my way of leading that drove you to side with Scar. For years I tried to rule justly and fairly, but it seems that was all a sham, since I continued to drive both hyenas and lions further apart. While we ruled from Pride Rock and basked in the beauty of the Pride Lands, you and your pack stewed in anger within the graveyard, silently cursing us for denying you a proper place within the plains. Scar took advantage of your plight and hate, for which I did nothing to ease. On my honor, as the king, if you and your pack come to aid us in our most desperate hour, I shall find a home for your pack to live and hunt freely in the sunlight so that we may one day live in peace. I shall even uplift your banishment if you wish. The time for grudges and old hatreds must be put to rest. Mufasa spoke as he bowed to the hyena, causing at least one lioness to faint in the background. Aye, thanks. That's it, is all we really wanted, I guess. Was a real home. To be treated fairly. I promise, I'll bring the hyena pack, okay, and who knows, maybe I'll go with the idiot brat over there. I don't think I really belong here anymore after all this. Besides, the kid grows on ya. Shenzi replied with a small chuckle directed at the boy. With that said and done, the blonde undid her restraints to let her loose. The hyena wobbled to her feet, stumbling a bit since her paws were still a bit numb. But once circulation returned, she took off like a shot towards the elephant graveyard. Bring your pack to the gorge, we'll meet up there, Mufasa yelled after her, making her yell back a got it. We're leaving now, Hasarabi asked, noting the grim expression on her mate's face as he and the Pride stared out towards the darkened plains. The Pride sister's eyes widening as the darkness seemed to spread even faster now. What once took hours to expand had now started to visibly speed up to minutes. At this pace it wouldn't be much longer till the lands were consumed. We don't have the time to sit and wait anymore. If Scar's dark heart is the cause of this, then he must have gone to the gorge to further fuel his hatred. We have to act now. Yuna and Riku, was it as soon as your master arrives, direct this Aqua to the gorge without delay. We shall be making our stand there. With any luck, we'll have cut down a number of those Heartless to make your master's job easier. Timon and Pumbaa, I leave the cubs in your care. You may stay at Pride Rock till the fighting is over. Thanks to you, we have a better understanding of what we're up against, the king announced, causing the two friends to salute and promise they'd look after the cubs. All right then, I'll be sure to back you up. As part of my ninja way, I will do my best to help those in need if it's in my power. And the way I figure it, this is my fight too, Naruto offered as he drew a pair of kunai, giving them a small twirl in his hands. Don't forget us, we're coming too, yelled out Simba, with his friend Nala nodding in agreement as they bared their teeth to make themselves look more fierce. But it instead made for an adorable sight, making the various lionesses laugh heartily, most especially the cubs' respective mothers. Your courage is admirable, but this won't be a simple pouncing lesson. This is war, and a war is no place for cubs. Mufasa gently chastised the two with a small smile. That's not fair. Naruto's supposed to be a cub like us, but he's going to fight. We want to protect the Pride Lands too. It's our home, Simba yelled out, and was then gently patted on the head by his father. Passionate and loving. I think you'd make for a fine king someday. But regardless, you cannot come. Lionesses and Naruto, we are going, the king announced as he and the Pride marched off with the human following close behind them, leaving behind a pair of scowling cubs, a relieved meerkat and warthog, and a pair of fairies wishing them good luck while waving goodbye. As the Pride marched, the form of Zira sidled up to the blonde human with a small scowl on her face. Hey Zira, you are going to fight too? Why don't you have a cub on the way? He asked with a somewhat worried expression, making the lioness scoff. Save your concern for someone who cares. My cub won't be along for a while, and it won't matter if our home fades into oblivion anyway. Besides, a stupid dreamer like you needs looking after, she replied with a smirk, gently bumping against him with her shoulder. Why Zira, you're concerned for my safety? I'll mark that as an improvement towards your bleak outlook on life and other living things, the whiskered teen stated proudly. Don't be deluded, you little brat. You took responsibility of me and my cub. It is simply in my own selfish interests to look after my newest patron. Nothing more, she replied with a shake of her head, making the blonde wonder if this was Zira's way of showing affection. Regardless, it was nice to have some backup. But then something was troubling him. It had been at least 2 days since his arrival in the Pride Lands. Had anyone noticed that he had been missing back home? If so, then that'd be a mess that would need cleaning up later. But for the time being, he'd worry more about helping in the upcoming fight. Elsewhere, and there they go. Things are picking up now. Axel spoke with a dry chuckle with his arms crossed over his, looking on as the Pride marched on towards the gorge where a legion of Heartless were waiting, along with their current leader figure Scar. His boss, Zero, seemed busy munching on a stick of sea-salt ice cream, the light blue snack slowly vanishing in the shadow of Zero's hood. Indeed, we originally came to investigate a spike in Heartless activity, and things quickly escalated when Scar's heart was claimed by the darkness. I can't help but wonder how that boy fits into things to defy and change the course of fate, to change the script of the story. That's a rare gift, Zero muttered in thought. You think the kid's a Keyblade wielder and he's from that realm filled with ninjas, right? Why's that world so special? Word is, Heartless don't exist there, Axel asked out of curiosity, hoping that his boss may provide some insight. He remembered when Zero first came into Organization 13 and quickly took leadership from Zenmas, but that would be a tale for another time. Regardless, Zero was an abnormally powerful and unusually insightful nobody. If he isn't, then he certainly has the potential. The Elemental Nations is a complex realm, filled with many mysterious powers and phenomena. Perhaps the Heartless do exist in the Elemental Nations, but they cannot manifest themselves there. Maybe an aforementioned phenomena keeps them at bay, or there's another explanation entirely. Whatever the circumstance, we have intervened enough on the behalf of the boy and his friends. Let's just watch and see how the rest plays out, Zero explained, and then pointed towards Pride Rock, where a certain blue-haired Keyblade master had arrived in the form of a panther. I can't wait to see how things go down. Should I memorize it, boss? Axel asked with a chuckle, earning a shrug from his boss. The crimson-haired nobody giving a small smirk as he turned his attention back to the marching Pride, and couldn't help but wonder how that blonde kid's presence would further change the course of the Pride Land's fate. Was he really a potential Keyblade wielder? There didn't seem to be anything special about him, but then one shouldn't judge a book by its cover. You think the kid's a Keyblade wielder and he's from that realm filled with ninjas, right? Why's that world so special? Word is, Heartless don't exist there, Axel asked out of curiosity, hoping that his boss may provide some insight. He remembered when Zero first came into Organization 13 and quickly took leadership from Zenmas, but that would be a tale for another time. Regardless, Zero is an abnormally powerful and unusually insightful nobody. If he isn't, then he certainly has the potential. The Elemental Nations is a complex realm, filled with many mysterious powers and phenomena. Perhaps the Heartless do exist in the Elemental Nations, but they cannot manifest themselves there. Maybe an aforementioned phenomena keeps them at bay, or there's another explanation entirely. Whatever the circumstance, we have intervened enough on the behalf of the boy and his friends. Let's just watch and see how the rest plays out, Zero explained, and then pointed towards Pride Rock, where a certain blue-haired Keyblade master had arrived in the form of a panther. I can't wait to see how things go down. "Should I memorize it, boss?" Axel asked with a chuckle, earning a shrug from his boss. The crimson-haired nobody giving a small smirk as he turned his attention back to the marching pride, and couldn't help but wonder how that blonde kid's presence would further change the course of the Pride Land's fate. Was he really a potential Keyblade wielder? There didn't seem to be anything special about him, but then one shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Chapter 4: Battle for the Pride Lands. "This really bites," grumbled the form of Simba as he and Nala watched the forms of their family, friends, and pride continue to shrink into the distance. The two cubs desperately wishing that they too could join the fight to protect their home as well. Both Timon and Pumbaa sat in the background, the two having a somewhat sympathetic expression on their faces. "Well, the king said that war's not a place for cubs. He just doesn't want you getting hurt or anything." Pumbaa spoke up, trying to ease the frustrated cub a bit, but the young prince was now restlessly tapping his claws against the ground with a huff. "I know that, but others are always saving me. My dad saved me back in the elephant graveyard, and Naruto saved me from a stampede, so I just want to be of help to them. I can't just sit here while everyone's gone off to fight." The prince spoke with a scowl, his best friend Nala feeling much the same. "I wouldn't worry too much, kid. Your dad's the king, right? He looks pretty tough. Same with all those lionesses. Even that weird hairless monkey looked like he'd be good in a scrap. They'll be fine." Timon spoke with a tone of confidence to try and lighten the mood, his warthog pal quickly nodding in agreement, albeit with a somewhat forced smile. "Maybe, but look at it out there. There's no telling how many of those heartless things are waiting. Hundreds, thousands more. They'll have the hyenas for backup, but that might not be enough." Simba spoke thoughtfully with a somewhat depressed sigh. He then turned to both Yuna and Riku, who were sitting on a rock, faithfully awaiting their master's arrival. "Don't worry about it. That's why I'm here," spoke an unfamiliar voice to the Pridelanders, but it caused both Yuna and Riku to joyously shout a cheer that sounded like master. They turned and saw a female panther with black fur and a mop of shimmering blue hair atop her head, and at her side was her third assistant Pain, who had her arms crossed beneath her. "Master, thank goodness you're here. It's been a real mess." Me and Riku, Yuna began to explain, giving her report of the current situation, starting with being captured by the two nobodies and explaining that the king and his lionesses had gone off to fight in the gorge where Scar attempted to murder both Mufasa and Simba. The Keyblade Master listened intently and then couldn't help but sigh. It seemed as if the world order had been completely disrupted in more ways than one. "I see. That boy Naruto, I remember him from the library. He would regularly visit. Seemed like a nice boy. Still, to distort the natural order of a realm to this degree, it might be irreversible." Aqua muttered to herself. She quickly shook her head, since that'd be an issue for later. Right now, the realm seemed to be on the verge of being consumed by the darkness, so she would need to go to this gorge to seal up the breach. If Naruto managed to rescue Simba and potentially averted Mufasa's preordained death during the stampede, then explained a few things, including the sudden rise of Heartless activity. "All of you stay here. I'll go there immediately," Aqua stated as she sprinted off across the plains, leaving the Gullwings and Pridelanders behind to await whatever may come next. However, being told to stay only made Simba all the more frustrated at his inability to help until the sounds of flapping wings was heard overhead. Looking up, he and Nala couldn't help but smile at the sight of a familiar figure. Meanwhile, at the gorge, "Is it weird that I'm having second thoughts about this?" asked Naruto as he and the Pride of Lions entered the gorge, the atmosphere around them feeling dense and heavy, as if it were meant to suffocate the life out of them. And there was also a sense of dread and oppression, like all the happiness in the world had been drained away. The boy's question earned a dry chuckle from the king as he replied, "Not in the slightest. I am as well, just like the rest of the lionesses. But we have no choice but to defeat Scar and these Heartless once and for all." His statement earning nods of agreement from the lionesses, their faces taut and unreadable as they mentally prepared themselves for the fight ahead. "And I take it that you have a plan of attack?" the whiskered teen asked as he pulled out his kunai, his fingers wrapped tightly around the handles until his knuckles turned white. This would be the first time he'd ever actually be in a real war. He wasn't even out of the academy yet, so he hoped that his minimal combat training could see him through against the Heartless. Scar seems to fancy himself a schemer. Thinks he's smarter than everyone else. He thinks he's always a step ahead. So we'll do the last thing he would expect us to do. We'll charge straight up the middle and put an end to him. The king replied with a small laugh, making his human friend nod in understanding. "Works for me. With any luck, we may catch Scar by surprise." And the blonde spoke and paused for a brief moment, his eyes flashing a golden color as he sensed something that started to ring warning bells inside his head. With one quick motion, he drew a pair of shuriken from his pouch and threw them upward, causing two black forms to land against the ground with a thud, revealing it to be a pair of Heartless that soon vanished in wisps of smoke. "Think we can still catch him off guard?" the whiskered teen asked in a whisper, hoping that he'd silence the Heartless fast enough and that there wasn't some kind of mental link between them and their quarry. "Come out of hiding. I know you're there," called out the voice of the traitor himself, making the lionesses groan that they had lost the element of surprise. Naruto stamped his foot and growled out, "Son of a that's my mother you're talking about." Mufasa spoke in an even tone as he calmly marched out into the open with the Pride following close behind him, with both his mate Sarabi and the human Naruto walking along both sides of him. "Sorry about that. Are you sure you're related to Scar?" the blonde asked with a curious expression, since both the king and his former brother had very little in common. While Mufasa was strong, honorable, and fair, Scar was devious, underhand or pawed, and obviously amoral. It was like night and day between the two of them. I have been asking myself that same question recently. The king responded with a rueful smirk. As the pride marched on, they saw in full view what they were up against. Stretched out along the gorge were legions of implike creatures with shining yellow eyes, the Heartless no doubt. Many of them clinging to and climbing along the cliff walls, and many more stood atop the cliff's edges. Scar himself was in plain view, sitting near the tree that Simba had clung onto before during the stampede. It was as if the black-maned lion was arrogantly putting himself on display to taunt Mufasa and the others. You have but one chance, Scar. Surrender now, and I promise to make your end swifter and more final. Mufasa spoke with a ferocious snarl, baring his fangs at his former brother. I highly doubt he'll surrender with an entire army of those heartless things between him and us, Naruto pointed out, earning an amused snort from Zira, who was standing directly behind him. He won't, but now no one can say I didn't attempt to end this peacefully, however unlikely it'd be. The king replied with a small shake of his head. For some reason, the boys' commentary seemed to amuse the lionesses, which helped to put them at ease. Indeed, though it's a shame you all have to die here, although, even if it means ruling an empty kingdom, I shall still be king regardless. The Heartless lion spoke, grinning beneath the wildebeest skull that covered his head. The Heartless began chittering as they began to crawl towards the pride. The lionesses crouching down, preparing to spring into action on their king's order. Give the word, and we'll charge, Sarabi whispered to her mate as she too started to crouch down, eagerly flexing her claws. Naruto, however, shook his head and interjected by speaking no. Too many of them, they'll likely disrupt our momentum before we can get close to Scar, but I might have an idea to draw him out. Maybe buy some time for the hyenas and this Aqua to get here. If you have something, share it quickly, Mufasa whispered back, puffing his out to prepare himself to give the order to charge to his pride. Scar Ewing-er, Naruto yelled out, causing the lionesses to look towards the boy, finding it surprising that he knew such language. The king looking at the boy questioningly as if he had gone crazy. The blonde himself knew that this was somewhat desperate, but he remembered how his good friend Anko told him that an effective shinobi trick was to infuriate or get under the skin of your enemy. It would make them sloppy or have them make rookie mistakes if they couldn't think straight. Right now, he was basically winging it. Anko was a master of T&I, while he was still a struggling academy student, so he wasn't sure if he could successfully trick Scar due to his inexperience, but now wasn't the time to self-doubt. It was do or die time. Fortunately, his name-calling had earned a flash of anger on the Heartless lion's face, which melted into a charming smile that was obviously laced with venom as he spoke in suave tones such language. Didn't your mother teach you manners? Boy, what do you take me for, some fellow cub who throws a tantrum over trivial things? Nope, I'm an orphan. And I take you as a chicken shit coward that can't do anything for himself. You're always having others do the dirty work for you. First the hyenas, and now these heartless things. You'll never be able to compare to Mufasa as a king, the blonde stated with a smirk, knowing that the Heartless lion was a coward to the core. You dare speak that way to me? I am double no triple the king Mufasa is, or ever was, Scar roared angrily, slamming a paw to the ground, showing that the blonde had struck him in his soft spot. Prove it then. At least Mufasa's willing to fight on the front lines with us. You're hiding in the background. Some king you are if you don't have the S to face me yourself. Naruto spoke, pointing an accusatory finger at the Heartless lion, behind him the entire pride of lions giving him some questioning looks. Fine, I will prove it then, come at me, Scar roared as he pounced off his perch and made his way towards the front of the horde of Heartless, the impish-looking creatures clearing a path for him as he stalked forward, his eyes hatefully glaring at the human boy. Time to be a dumbass hero again, Naruto whispered to himself as he sighed, twirling his kunai in his hands a bit as he too stepped forward, but a paw from Mufasa was placed against his stomach to stop him for a brief moment. What are you doing? He will kill you, the king warned him, knowing that his former brother wouldn't be showing any mercy given that it was Naruto that exposed the traitor's plans. What do you think, we can't take on this many on our own? I'll be stalling Scar for time till our backup can get here, the whiskered teen quietly explained to the king, glancing between him and an angrily pacing Scar. Noble of you, but I should be the one to fighting him. It is me that he truly wants to kill, Mufasa retorted with a snarl directed at his former brother, the crimson-maned lion's claws on full display now. True, but why do you think Scar resorted to trickery and deceit to kill you? He knows he could never beat you in a straight-up fight. But with me, he'll underestimate me. If nothing else, I could distract him long enough. But if you see an opening to gut him, I suggest you take it. Might not be the most honorable approach, but I don't think we are in a situation that permits a thing called honor. Besides, I doubt old Scar will play fair anyway, the boy stated, earning a grim nod from the king as several lionesses bowed their heads in respect to the boy's courage. Very well then, but whatever it is that you do, don't die, the king warned his young friend, who swallowed a lump in his throat and walked forward, trying his best to keep himself from trembling since this would be his first real taste of life or death combat. Then again, was there anything that could truly prepare someone for such a thing? Ready to die, boy, you have been a thorn in my side from the moment you set foot on Pride Rock, Scar spoke with a low growl and flashed his fangs, trying to intimidate the blonde boy, though the whiskered teen didn't seem scared of the black-maned lion at all. Instead, the boy had a look of pity on his face, almost as if he looked at Scar as though he were some kind of pathetic little creature. "No, I don't plan on dying anytime soon. There's others counting on me to survive. Besides, I doubt a chicken shit bully like you knows all that much about fighting," Naruto stated as he got into a fighting stance, holding a kunai in each hand. The scarred lion merely grinned sadistically and slammed a paw on the ground, creating a series of spiderweb-like cracks. "That was before, but now that my heart is one with this darkness, I have grown far stronger than before. Once I am finished with you, I shall take immense joy in ripping apart Mufasa himself," the Heartless lion stated with an evil smile. "Me and my big mouth. Why does the universe hate me so much?" the blonde muttered in slight anguish. Stealing his resolve, he stared down his opponent as the two circled around slowly. It was as if they were now sizing each other up, waiting for the first move or the first mistake to be made. The boy didn't have to wait for very long as Scar leapt high into the air to pounce on him. The blonde rolled across the ground and quickly sliced into Scar's legs before he landed, making the lion yowl in pain as he limped for a few moments. Some black and kai tendrils formed and began to knit his wounds closed, making the lion chuckle darkly as he spoke. "It seems that enhanced strength isn't the only thing that the darkness has given to me." With a growl, he charged at the boy and swiped at him with a massive paw, but the blonde ducked beneath the lion's paw in the nick of time and slashed at the lion's face, making a deep gash across his muzzle, but that too was quickly stitched together by tiny dark tendrils. Some of the lionesses began to cheer for the boy as they saw that he was holding his own for the time being, buying them some time till the cavalry arrived. Naruto, however, was mentally cursing himself for diving headfirst into danger without so much as a plan yet again. He hadn't counted on Scar having enhanced strength or some kind of healing ability. And now he faced the likelihood of being mauled or torn apart, but he wasn't going to back down just yet, because being a ninja meant facing danger and often overcoming what could be considered possible odds. And he was determined to beat them all. But first he'd need to survive against a crazed lion. With a roar, Scar swiped at the boy's leg with his paw, snagging his claws on the human's pants leg. Seeing his chance, the lion yanked Naruto to the ground and pounced on top of him, almost crushing the boy beneath his weight as he wildly bit at Naruto's face with his sharp teeth. The boy frantically struggled, trying to avoid his face getting ripped off. He managed to free up one of his arms from beneath the Heartless lion and began stabbing at his neck, trying to either force the lion to choke to death on his own or retreat to safety. At last, his weapon landed on its mark and pierced deep into the flesh of Scar's throat. The lion let out a choked gasp as leaked from his mouth. Scar pulled away from the trapped human and limped away, clutching at his throat as he waited for his newest wound to heal. Glaring at the human with pure hate, he wheezed out, "Kill them," and then he began to pad off into the horde of Heartless as they made a path for him, which then closed behind him as he passed through. "Hey, where are you running off to, you bastard? We aren't done yet," Naruto yelled as he cracked his neck a bit, his hand now soaked in scars, and then he noticed that the Heartless had begun their approach, making the boy curse loudly. "Oh shit." Several Heartless pounced off the canyon walls to attack the whiskered teen, but were all quickly smacked away by Mufasa. Lionesses charged, the king roared, prompting the pride to sprint into the hordes of Heartless, their powerful bodies acting as battering rams that sent numerous Heartless flying into the air. Roars filled the gorge as the lions swiped at the black creatures. Occasionally one would jump in the air and a lioness would catch it with her mouth before flinging it away. Naruto joined in the fight as well, brandishing his kunai, cutting away at the Heartless one by one, fighting alongside the king as the pride inched their way through the army of Heartless. As they fought their way through, Naruto saw the form of Scar continuing to slink away farther and farther into the back of the Heartless army. And despite the ferociousness of the lionesses, they were starting to grow tired and were slowing down, losing their momentum. "We can't keep this up for much longer." Naruto spoke to himself and noticed that a Heartless had gotten on Sarabi's back. The boy leapt over Mufasa's form and then kicked off the Heartless from the queen's back, earning a quick thanks from her. "Suggestions?" the king asked as he slapped another one of the black creatures away. "Two open here. Fall back to the gorge entrance. It'll funnel them to us, make it easier to pick them off," the blonde suggested as he pointed behind them to the entryway. The king nodded and called out to the lionesses to fall back. The two sprinted towards the gorge entrance with the rest of the pride following after them until they all came to a stop at the gorge opening. "Form up and pair up, watch each other's backs. They could charge at any time," Naruto called out, taking on a leadership role in the heat of combat, the lionesses bunching together as they waited for the Heartless to come to them. Amongst the sea of black creatures, Scar appeared with a sinister expression. "Not yet, wait for it, let them bask in terror," Scar ordered, chuckling darkly to himself as the wound on his neck began to close up, though it still caused him pain. "Okay, now would be a good time for one of those epic and heroic entrances like in a movie," Naruto muttered to himself, as he and the lions all tried to catch their breath as they waited for round two. The form of Zira sidled up to him with a scowl on her face. "Boy, if we all die here, I have to say I loathe you." She spoke and then bumped his leg with her elbow. "Hey, you love me?" the blonde shouted, having misheard the lioness, making her slam a paw down on his foot, which caused a sharp yelp of pain to escape his mouth. "That's not what I said, you idiot," she yelled in a clearly aggravated tone, shaking her head with a roll of her eyes, believing that she was going to die with this idiot human. However, the sounds of familiar cackling and laughter could now be heard in the air, making the lions look around for the source. "Hey Scar," shouted the voice of Shenzi from the cliffside, prompting the addressed lion to turn towards her direction with a snarl, his eyes glaring at her as though he wanted to light her on fire with just his vision. "You don't think that I haven't forgotten about you? I will enjoy making you suffer for exposing me earlier," Scar shouted as he directed a number of Heartless in her direction, causing them to climb up the cliff wall. "I figured as much, which is why I decided to bring some friends." Geronimo the hyena yelled out as she leaped high into the air, grinning almost maniacally as she dove into the army of Heartless, and then she was followed by dozens of hyenas who mimicked her battle cry as they dived into the horde as well. Scar's expression changed into one of shock as he tried to process what was happening before his eyes, and the lions could see that their chance had come. "Now's our chance," Charge Mufasa roared as he sprinted towards his former brother, the lionesses following him with renewed vigor as they barreled through the hordes of darkness, knocking them all to the side, with fierce determination to finally end Scar. Naruto was hot on their heels to join the fray, but he soon felt a burning feeling in his lungs and his heart pounded inside of his like a drum. He shook his head trying to shrug off the building pain in his body, but something was very wrong. "Look out," shouted someone. When the boy looked up, a number of Heartless had landed on top of him, dogpiling him and cutting off his movement, with dozens more joining, putting an end to any chance of escape as the added weight kept him from moving. Then the blonde's vision all turned to black. Location. When Naruto snapped his eyes open again, he found himself standing on another platform of colored glass, the picture beneath him depicting a mermaid with crimson hair. "Not this again," he muttered to himself, remembering the last time he was in a place like this, the air feeling more oppressive around him, almost as if the atmosphere was trying to crush him. Shaking his head, the blonde tried to find a means to return to the real world, but there was nothing but darkness in this seemingly never-ending void. "Hey there, Bauya, seems you're kind of stuck," spoke a female voice, prompting him to turn around, and was met by the sight of a beautiful woman, perhaps the most beautiful female specimen he had ever seen in his life. Dark caramel-colored skin with whisker markings like himself on her cheeks, long crimson hair that reached her back, crimson eyes with a black slit pupil, soft and full lips with a pair of fangs jutting out from her upper lip, a large bust to rival a certain Sannin with a thick hourglass figure, and a regal-looking robe that was purposefully worn to expose her legs and a large amount of her cleavage. And between her fingers was a golden pipe that she was smoking from. And then there were 9 fluffy foxtails behind her. "What's the matter, dear? Am I so wondrous to behold that you are speechless? If you wish to grovel and worship me, I will not stop you." She spoke in a sensual tone as she blew some smoke into the boy's face. "Are you the Kyuubi?" the whiskered teen asked, gulping slightly at the prospect of facing the most powerful of the Biju. If the stories were true, then she could squish him like a bug if she changed into her bestial form. "Correct. I suppose the tails are a bit of a giveaway. Allow me to properly introduce myself. I am Kurama Kitsune. A pleasure to finally meet my host," she replied, and then gave a regal curtsy. From her speech and mannerisms, it was almost as if she were royalty than a ferocious beast. For years, Naruto had known that he was somehow connected to the Kyuubi. It couldn't have been coincidence that his birthday was the day of the Kyuubi's attack, and this absolutely confirmed it. "So your host, I guess I'm a walking prison for you, or something, right?" he asked with a nervous chuckle, hoping that she wouldn't hold a grudge against him. "Indeed, simply put, but accurate nonetheless. I have to say, my living conditions have been absolutely deplorable. Your mindscape is not but a sewer, and then I find myself in this void. Honestly, my previous host had some manners and at least gave me a decent mindscape to dwell in." Hirama spoke as she took a drag from her pipe and exhaled some smoke through her nostrils. "Previous host, someone else contained you before me?" he asked her with a grimace, his curiosity now piqued. "Naturally. My first host was Mito Uzumaki, wife of the Shodaime Hokage. I think I took on some of her personality and became that which you see now. But my second host, Kushina Uzumaki, she was a brute, a bully, and a barbarian. Complete and humane savage, but she did have a heart of gold deep down." The Kitsune responded in an offhanded manner, though a devious gleam formed in her eyes. The blonde tilted his head as he connected the dots, finding it curious that the previous hosts all shared his surname. "Couldn't possibly be a coincidence. Those two, are they my relatives or something?" he asked, hoping to finally learn something about his origins. Hirama gave an almost sinister smile as she walked towards the boy, her bare feet slapping against the glass floor. "Obviously, dear. Mito was your grandmother. Kushina, your mother. 3 generations of Jinchuriki, and a relative of not just 1, but 3 Hokage stand before me." The Kitsune spoke, blowing a plum of smoke into the boy's face as she let out a haughty laugh. Naruto's face fell into one of shock, his eyebrow twitching as he tried to absorb this newfound information. "You can't be serious. There's no way some orphan like Mika could be related to the Hokages. There's just no way," he muttered almost brokenly, trying to deny this overwhelming revelation. "Are you certain your mother was married to the Yondaime, Minato Namikaze, and the Uzumakis have been allies of the Senju clan for decades? That is, prior to the clan's fall?" Hirama spoke, as she revealed a little more information to the lad. The boy's form starting to shake. Clan was all he could ask, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Uzumaki was a powerful clan with their own island nation. Some say that Uzu was well on its way to becoming the 6th major shinobi village. That is, until a coalition of villages attacked Uzu and destroyed it. Kano was supposed to send aid to save their longtime ally, but no aid came. The village you love so much left your clan to die. Your homelands raped and looted, and the few survivors to scatter into the winds, she explained, causing her host to burst into tears and fall to his knees, his hands clasped over his own ears so he wouldn't need to hear her voice anymore. Shut up, you're lying, you're just messing with me, he shouted, trying to deny her words. There was just no way any of that could be true. She was trying to play on his fantasies and insecurities, trying to manipulate him to her own advantage, but she grabbed one of his arms by the wrist and pulled it away from his ear so she may speak into it. I am a lot of things, my dear, a trickster for certain. But I am no liar. It is you who denies the truth. You always knew the truth. You heard the whisperings of the villagers, your birthday matching up to when I attacked Konoha, and such other things. All I am doing is telling you that which you haven't yet found out for yourself. If you do not believe me, I am sure that your beloved Gigi can confirm what I am saying. She spoke to him in a sweet voice, her words almost seemingly coated in honey, belying the sinister intent in her eyes. If I'm supposedly so special, then why have I been treated like shit my whole life, he asked, growling through his teeth as he tried to pull away from her, but her grip was like a vice around his wrist. Because you're a resource, an asset, largely because of me. Only an Uzumaki can contain my vast powers. To many, you're just a weapon of war to be called on whenever it is convenient, to be forced to sacrifice yourself for the greed and preservation of those the world could do without. She explained in a blunt manner, not even bothering to sugarcoat the truth. That's all the shinobi world really is. It's how it is, no matter what realm you go. There will always be those in power who will abuse their power or cause harm unto others to further their own agendas, or use others to do the dirty work for them. It's all the same. My siblings and myself have been used as tools by shinobi for a long, long time. And still they continue to exploit us and our hosts. She explained with an almost tired sigh, her face taking on a more somber expression, making it difficult to tell if she was truly saddened or was putting on an act. Regardless, the blonde felt a bit sorry for her, and some of the things she said did make sense. He wasn't going to believe her outright that he was the son of the Yondaime or anything, but he was going to take her words with a grain of salt for the time being. Maybe, Scar is definitely one of those types you mentioned. Maybe that really is how things are throughout the realms, then I'll just have to change it. He spoke as clenched his fist tightly. Change it, she asked him with a slightly confused expression, wondering what he was going on about now. There's always going to be people around who abuse their power. I won't deny that, and there's definitely people like that in the elemental nations, maybe even in other realms. If that's the case, then I'll fight them all. I'll fight them so that people don't need to live in pain or suffering anymore. You and your siblings also suffered. I don't know what I can do about that, but I guess we could start by being partners, he asked at the end with an almost hopeful smile. And then the kitsune burst into a fit of laughter. My goodness, you're just like your mother, such a dreamer, and you believe that you can solve such a conundrum with brute force. Oh my, you just gave me a sense of nostalgia. Well, regardless of the case, if you're anything like Kushina Dono, I wouldn't mind lending you some of my power. Would I do so for selfish reasons? There are certain individuals that I desperately wish vengeance upon. The kitsune replied with a devious grin as her tails floofed out, angrily swishing about as some killing intent leaked out. Certain individuals, how are they bad people? The blonde asked as he crossed his arms. They are, Kurama replied bluntly, not bothering to hide her hatred for those she is holding a grudge against. Works for me then. Someday though I hope we could be friends. I'm sure I don't want you for an enemy, the blonde stated with a nervous chuckle, making the kitsune pat his head gently. You're sweet, and very wise. I know I fed you a pretty big pill to swallow, and you're still doubting me. But you'll come to know the truth sooner or later. Now then, aren't you in the middle of a war or something right now? The dark-skinned kitsune asked with a light-hearted chuckle, making the boy slap his cheeks as his mouth made an O shape. Oh shit, I almost forgot, I need to get the hell out of here, he shouted as he looked to and fro for a way out. Perhaps that object there may be of assistance, Kurama pointed out, causing her host to turn in the indicated direction. The object in question seemingly looking like a cross between a key and a sword of some kind, with a long golden handle, and the guarded cloud or wave-like portions shifting from yellow to blue and separate blue pieces on the pommel. The base featuring a gold fox with teal eyes set atop an intricate gold and pink etching. Hey, and think of as Keyblade. Look on Wiki. Seems kinda girly. The blonde muttered with a small grimace, but shrugged his shoulders and reached out. As soon as his fingers wrapped around the handle, the strange weapon glowed with golden light, and in a split second, Naruto flew away like a shooting star, not even having time to scream out in surprise as the kitsune was left on her own for the time being, that is until a second figure appeared behind her. He's got your spirit. Though, would it not have been better for his actual mother to reveal some of his past? Kurama asked as she turned to face the form of her second host, Kushina. The Uzumaki's arms crossed beneath her bust. Maybe, but I doubt he would have believed me any more than he believed you. Besides, it's not yet the time for me to meet him. That comes later, but what really concerns me are the trials he's going to face in the future. Some in Konoha and some abroad. Hiromaki, can you please aid my Sachi-kun for me? The Uzumaki asked with a serene smile on her face. Of course, if that boy is anything like you, which I believe that he is, then he'll provide me with much amusement. Still, to think he'd actually travel to other realms. Even I was surprised by this. Seems like his little universe got much bigger. The kitsune mused more to herself than smirked, very eager to see how the boy would develop under these conditions. Elsewhere, in the Pride Lands, Aqua huffed as she ran across the plains, her panther form inching its way closer towards the gorge where the Heartless had gathered. Almost there, just a bit more, she spoke out in relief as she neared her objective. The sounds of fighting being heard now as she got ever closer. The Keyblade Master then sensed danger approaching, causing her to skid to a halt as she summoned her Keyblade, holding the weapon in her mouth as she sensed something. Something powerful was coming. A rift of darkness appeared, and two figures clad in black emerged. Organization 13. Aqua muttered, recognizing their robes as her eyes narrowed. The crimson-haired nobody merely chuckled and replied, "That's us. I'm Axel. This is the boss, Zero. Sorry for the inconvenience, Keyblade Master, but we need to stall you for a while." Aqua raised an eyebrow as she crouched down, ready to pounce at a moment's notice in case they attacked, then asked them, "Stall me? Why, and why are you here in this realm? How can you be here? The realms have all been sealed." The form of Zero laughed in dry amusement and responded, "Sealed? The realms may be, but still connected. If one knows how, it is still possible to slip in and out of existence. We originally came here to investigate an unexpected swelling of Heartless activity, but something much more interesting happened. The boy you seek, he created a distortion." Distortion? Aqua asked in slight confusion, though from the nobody's words it sounded ominous. The boy changed the script of the story. Mufasa should have perished down in that gorge, but he did not. Scar's sins were exposed prematurely. The boy changed the course of fate, which in turn caused a distortion in the realm, inviting in the Heartless and causing Scar to join their ranks when he fell into darkness. Now, the darkness seeks to swallow up this realm, just as the dark always does, always seeking to envelop, swallow, and consume. Now that boy has me very curious to see if he can undo the damage he has done. And you would only make things too easy for him, Zero explained in a matter-of-fact tone. Aqua could only shake her head and shout, "If you won't let me pass peacefully, then I'll have to force my way through." She then charged at the two nobodies, making Axel step to the side with his arms crossed. "I wouldn't be doing that. The boss is pretty strong." The crimson-haired nobody warned with a smirk, but Aqua ignored his warning and leapt into the air, slashing at Zero with her Keyblade, only for the blade to pass through Zero's form as it vanished within the blink of an eye. Before Aqua could register that she had attacked an afterimage, a barrage of invisible blows assaulted her body, making her spit up saliva. When she fell to the ground, Zero now stood over her with a black Keyblade in hand, making the brunette's eyes widen in shock. "A Keyblade? How can a nobody have a Keyblade? Who are you?" Aqua demanded, trying to maintain focus as her vision faded in and out as she tried to maintain consciousness. "I am Zero, and I am the end of all things," Zero replied as a smile became visible beneath the black hood. Then, the ground rumbled as a pillar of golden light emerged from the gorge, and Aqua couldn't believe her eyes at what she was now witnessing. "It can't be," she whispered, muttering to herself in astonishment. "It is. The birth of a new Keyblade wielder," Zero responded and pointed up towards the pillar of light with Keyblade in hand and continued to speak. "Show me, boy. Are you the one?" As the pillar of light grew more intense, a pair of crimson eyes could be seen beneath Zero's hood, the red orbs burning with longing. Aqua noticed this and couldn't help but wonder what was it that Zero wanted, and why did this nobody have a Keyblade Terror event, as she asked, more to herself, wondering if this had something to do with her old and lost friends. "A Keyblade? How can a nobody have a Keyblade? Who are you?" Aqua demanded, trying to maintain focus as her vision faded in and out as she tried to maintain consciousness. "I am Zero, and I am the end of all things," Zero replied as a smile became visible beneath the black hood. Then, the ground rumbled as a pillar of golden light emerged from the gorge, and Aqua couldn't believe her eyes at what she was now witnessing. "It can't be," she whispered, muttering to herself in astonishment. "It is. The birth of a new Keyblade wielder," Zero responded and pointed up towards the pillar of light with Keyblade in hand and continued to speak. "Show me, boy. Are you the one?" As the pillar of light grew more intense, a pair of crimson eyes could be seen beneath Zero's hood, the red orbs burning with longing. Aqua noticed this and couldn't help but wonder what was it that Zero wanted, and why did this nobody have a Keyblade Terror event, as she asked, more to herself, wondering if this had something to do with her old and lost friends. Chapter 5: Awakening. Naruto's true power revealed. All was quiet within the gorge, the lions and hyenas all staring in awe at the pillar of light. The Heartless all skittering back a bit, since the intensity of it caused some of their numbers to disintegrate into nothingness. In the background, Scar shielded his eyes with a paw, he too being shocked at this sight. The light slowly dimmed out of existence as the form of Naruto emerged unscathed, holding a new weapon in hand. His clothes having changed from his usual orange jumpsuit to a crimson armor bearing similarities of the armor a samurai would wear, along with a black trench coat. The blonde's demeanor had also changed. He seemed more confident and sure of himself now as he surveyed his surroundings, eyeing the horde of Heartless standing between him and Scar. "Naruto, are you alright? What happened to you?" Mufasa asked as the king bounded over to the boy, placing a paw on his side to make sure the human cub was alright. The whiskered teen cracked his neck a bit and answered back, "I'm fine. Not entirely sure what happened, but it feels like I just woke up from a deep sleep. Hell, I feel better than ever." With a F of his wrist, he threw his keyblade, causing it to fly from his hand, the weapon spinning wildly through the air as lightning crackled from the blade, cutting through and zapping any Heartless in its path before returning back to his hand. The display earning looks of amazement from his allies. Scar broke from his stupor and blurted out, "Attack, kill, destroy." His orders spurred the Heartless into action as they resumed their attack. Both hyenas and lionesses quickly regained their bearings and fought back against their attackers, jaws snapping and claws slashing at any of the black creatures within reach. Sometimes a lioness would swing a mighty paw and send a group of Heartless flying through the air. Naruto stared at the form of Scar, who was sitting in the back, as one would expect of a coward. "We won't get anywhere picking off the small fry. We need to cut off the head of the serpent. Mufasa, keep the Heartless off of me. I'll do the rest." The blonde spoke urgently as he charged headlong into the horde, his blade swinging wildly as he carved a path through. With each swing hitting its mark, the Heartless vanished as hearts floated off into the sky. "Everyone protect Naruto and back him up," the king ordered as he trailed behind the boy, swiping at any Heartless within reach to keep them from surrounding the human, with Shenzi bounding up next to the Jinchuriki. "Hey, haha, nice makeover, be honest. Did you really think I'd skip out on this party?" the hyena asked with a cheeky grin, then grunted as she slammed her shoulder into one of the imp-like creatures that got in her way, with Naruto chuckling a little in response as he cleaved through a trio of Heartless that attempted to pounce on him. "Nah, I had faith you'd come. Though I'm surprised you got the rest of your pack to act so quickly," he responded before swatting away another Heartless with a backhanded blow with his free fist. "I have fibbed a bit and told them that Scar was planning to kill them all, so it would be in our best interest to team up with Mufasa and his pride," Shenzi admitted with a cackle. Her jaws then clamped around the head of a Heartless. She shook it around violently like a rag doll before tossing it aside. "I don't think that qualifies as fibbing," Mufasa noted with a deadpan expression, since he was certain that Scar would have destroyed them anyway so long as they were a threat to his power. As they progressed closer and closer to Scar, the horde of Heartless became thicker and thicker, slowing down their charge until they were only inching their way through. No matter how many of the black creatures they defeated, more constantly took their place. Naruto continued to wildly swing the Keyblade until it became but a blur that danced through the air, cutting down dozens of Heartless that got caught within reach of his blows. But even with the lions and hyenas' support, they were unable to gain any more ground. The whiskered teen squinted his eyes a little and saw the black-maned lion smirking arrogantly behind the skull mask he now wore. It was as if the false king were silently mocking him. "Smile while you can, you bastard," the blonde yelled out defiantly as he kicked away three more of the Heartless. The lionesses snarled angrily as they fended off the constant assault of the Heartless, but it was clear that they were getting worn down from just keeping the black imp-like creatures at bay. The hyenas were in no better condition since they had to charge all the way from the elephant graveyard to get here in time, thus they hadn't gotten a chance to catch their second wind before joining the battle. "I take back what I said earlier. This is the time for an epic and heroic entrance." Naruto spoke out and then slammed his elbow into an imp that attempted to jump onto Zira, the lioness giving a grunt of thanks before slamming her paw against another of those black imps. "Boy Zira, if we don't make it out of this, I just want you to know, I accept your feelings for me," shouted to the lioness, still mistakenly believing she had confessed her love for him earlier in the battle. The lioness stared at him and snarled angrily before spitting back, "Stop speaking nonsense, stupid human." The blonde blushed a bit in embarrassment. He supposed that this wasn't an appropriate time for that kind of talk, so instead he continued to cut through the swarms of Heartless, trying to get at the cowardly and devious lion hiding in the back of the horde, staying as far from the fighting as possible. "Cowardly bastard, come out here and fight. You call yourself a king when you don't have the S to fight your own battles," Naruto roared out, hoping to goad the lion into fighting him again. Though it seemed that the black-maned lion learned his lesson from last time, since he gave a knowing smile, not falling for that trick again. The Jinchuriki kept on hurling insults and other colorful language at Scar, but it all proved to be useless since he just stayed in place, waiting as the Heartless slowly began to wear down his adversaries. A toothy grin slowly spreading across his face in malicious glee, until the ground began to rumble beneath them. The sounds of trumpets blaring and fanfare could be heard, causing all eyes to look in Scar's direction. Most specifically behind him, as a dust cloud could be seen fast approaching. The black-maned lion turned around, his grin fading into a look of shock as herds of elephants and rhinos came down the opposite end of the gorge, charging ahead with reckless abandon and fire in their eyes. "Charge!" roared the form of Simba, riding on the head of a large bull elephant with Nala at his side, the two directing the rapid advance of the herd. The elephants bellowed as they reared their trunks back, preparing to strike, and between them were rhinos, lowering their heads so that their sharp horns pointed towards the many Heartless. "Out of the way," Scar ordered as he tried to put as much distance between him and the angry herds, running through the horde as quickly as his legs could carry him. only to come face to face with Naruto and Mufasa. He knew then that he was cornered. Nowhere to run or hide now, it's the end, Naruto shouted, an ethereal golden glow enveloping his form, with some crackling noises coming from his Keyblade. Beacon of hope awakened Naruto. Scar could only grit his teeth as his fight or flight instincts took over, and Kai black tendrils escaping his body along with a dark purple aura. No, I will not allow this to be my end. This is my kingdom, my rule, my army of darkness. I will not be defeated here by you. The Heartless lion roared angrily. Sin of envy. Heartless Scar. The tendril shot forward. The tips aimed to pierce the blonde's region, which he easily batted away with his blade with 3 quick strikes, and then leapt forward to get in close to the lion. Ducking underneath a paw that was aiming for his throat, Naruto pivoted on one foot to regain his balance and sent a swift kick into Scar's temple, cracking the wildebeest's skull, protecting his head. The blow disoriented the lion, giving Mufasa the chance to pounce on the traitor and bite into the flesh of his neck. Scar yelled out in pain. The tendrils grabbed Mufasa and threw him off. The Lion King spat out the traitors and spoke in a blank tone, your and flesh taste rotten. I shouldn't be surprised. The 2 lions squared off, with Naruto standing next to the king, his Keyblade pointed at Scar. The Heartless lion looked to the side, noticing that the Heartless were being driven away by the combined efforts of the lions, hyenas, and Simba's reinforcements. He was alone. No assassination attempts. No army. Just us and you. Naruto muttered coldly. There would be no escaping from death this time for the lion. For all the harm he had done and attempted to do, they had to make sure that he would never be able to do it again. Scar growled in frustration. He slammed his paw on the ground, making it crack beneath him, but to a much lesser extent than last time. Will my strength leaving me? Scar muttered, wondering why the power was leaving his body now of all times. Naruto took this moment of confusion to swing his blade at the black-maned lion. Scar raised his front leg up to shield himself from the blow, only for the blade to slice clean through, severing off his leg. Scar's eyes widened in horror and pain. He expected his wounds to mend and heal, but they did not. Not this time. Mufasa struck the Heartless lion across the jaw, sending the wildebeest's skull flying off his head, sending him into the ground. Why my power? Don Scar muttered in an almost broken manner, unable to comprehend what had just happened. I'll tell you why, spoke an unfamiliar voice, making them all look up and see 2 unfamiliar figures now standing over Scar, a man with spiky red hair carrying a blue-haired panther on his shoulder, and an unknown hooded figure. The latter continued to speak. This venue is far too noisy, so let me clear it up first. The hooded figure spoke and then snapped their fingers, causing all of the Heartless to blink out of existence, leaving behind only their hearts that floated away into the sky. While your heart was deeply and irredeemably mired in the darkness, it was a weak one, beset by envy, pride, and insecurity. A weak heart such as yours could never hope to master the power of the Heartless. You provided some entertainment, but your part is done. Your existence is meaningless now. Heckly, the hooded figure spoke and with a gesture caused Scar to fade into dust as if he had never even existence. Naruto blinked his eyes a few times, narrowing them to try and see what was under Zero's hood, but he could only see blazing red eyes in the shadow of the hood, and a wide grin that reminded him of a certain vampire that wielded a musket and sang opera he once saw in a manga. It's Axel and Zero, right? We were told about you by Timon and Pumbaa. Naruto spoke up, his hand involuntarily gripping the Keyblade so tightly his knuckles turned white. In response, Axel set his tongue and then deposited the panther on his shoulder onto the ground. Got it in one, kid. We came by to return this to you. The Keyblade master that was supposed to get you out of this pickle. The red-haired man explained with a chuckle, twirling a chakram on one finger as the hyenas and lions all stood at the ready to attack. Even Simba and Nala watched carefully in case they needed to order another charge from their reinforcements. I'm afraid that I was a little rough with her. On behalf of Organization 13, you have my apologies. Zira spoke and did a small bow with one hand on there, and then looked up at the sky where the black hole was waiting to swallow the Pride Lands. You needed her to close that? Yes, well, it seems she's unavailable. You need to close it off then, boy. It's your fault, so it's your responsibility. Zero spoke and then pointed at Naruto, the crimson eyes twinkling a bit beneath the hood. What do you mean it's my fault? Naruto questioned. The blonde questioned, wondering why he was the one at fault. It's an unwritten rule not to meddle with the natural order of the realms. You broke the world order of the Pride Lands, creating a phenomenon known as a distortion, a tear in the world's fabric caused when the natural order is disrupted. The king, Mufasa, was meant to tragically perish right here in this very gorge. And you prevented that, altering the flow of the fate. I suppose you could say, if you mess with fate, fate messes with you. Thus, this war, the Heartless almost swallowing the realm, it's all your fault. All because of your mistake. Zero explained in an almost mocking manner. The blonde Jinchuriki was silent for a few moments, slowly blinking his eyes as he quietly contemplated Zero's words. Then with a small smirk he answered, rescuing Simba wasn't a mistake. Neither was keeping Mufasa alive. Doesn't matter if this is my fault or not. What happened, happened. And I will always help my friends regardless of the consequences. That's my ninja way. Your Nindo, Zero muttered quietly, crossing their arms over there as they quietly mused to themselves. Then, Zero slowly clapped their hands together, a small shark-like smile appearing from the shadows of the hood. Your heart is a strong one, I can tell. You have yet to even begin tapping into your true power, boy. State your name, boy. I am Naruto Uzumaki, the whiskered teen boldly and proudly answered, the Keyblade vanishing from his hand since the fight was over, and he sensed no ill intentions from the two. At this time, Naruto Uzumaki, I see. You remind me of someone I once knew very well. As a gift for amusing me, I shall do you a favor. Zero spoke and summoned a black Keyblade, pointing it towards the sky. In a few moments, the black hole vanished from existence, and the sky returned to its natural blue with the sun shining high in the heavens. I have dispelled the distortion. No strings attached. But the next time you cause a distortion, you shall need to fix it yourself. I learned long ago that you can only rely on others to a certain extent before you must rely on yourself. Keep that advice as a small bonus from me. Zero spoke before snapping their fingers, summoning a rift of darkness next to Axel, which he stepped into without a word. Just who the hell are you really? Why do you have one of those swords too? Naruto demanded, pointing an accusatory finger at the hooded figure. All in due time. We shall meet again soon, Zero muttered before vanishing into the rift, leaving the blonde to stew in his confusion. With a tired sigh, the blonde fell to the ground with a soft thump, the battle having worn him out, the numerous lionesses and hyenas following suit. Mufasa also panted in exhaustion, turning his attention to the cubs still perched atop the head of an elephant, likely the alpha of its herd. What are you two doing here? Shouldn't you have been at Pride Rock? And where did the elephants and rhinos come from? The king asked his cub. Well, Zazu found our missing pride sisters, and all the herds gathered at some oasis as they tried to hide from the darkness. Zazu brought them all back to Pride Rock, then me and Nala got these guys to volunteer to help, so we came here as quickly as we could since you would need backup. Simba explained with a sheepish smile, hoping he wouldn't get in trouble for this. A warm smile crossed the king's face as he replied to his son, for once, I am glad you chose to disobey me. Come, we must gather our injured and see that the circle of life is brought back into balance. Also, I think I promised a reward to the hyenas for their aid. Mufasa noted as he turned to the confused hyenas, all of them wondering what he meant by reward. Cool, let's all go home then, Naruto said and picked up the injured form of Aqua, balancing her on his shoulders as the elephants began to gently scoop up anyone that was injured to allow them a ride on their backs. The blonde noticed that Zira was staring at the small pile of ashes where Scar used to be. He approached her and gently placed a hand atop her head. He's gone now. He's really gone, she muttered, unsure whether to feel relief or sadness. Don't mourn him. Mourning is meant for those whom you love or loved you. No matter your feelings for him, he could never fill that void in your heart. I promise you though, I'll do everything I can to help make you happy and learn to trust others again. The blonde promised her and then began scratching behind her ears. Faye, whatever human. Still, we didn't die today, so I'll maintain some cautious optimism, she replied with a smirk, relaxing herself into his touch. Suwo, you gonna starting now? Shenzi spoke up, ruining the moment for them, and then they both clocked her on the head for butting in like that. After a few minutes, all preparations were made and the injured were ready for travel. Fortunately, it seemed that they had no casualties in this war. And so, they headed back home to Pride Rock, ready to face a new dawn for the Pride Lands. 2 days later, after the war, the Pride Lands swiftly returned to normalcy. And as promised, Mufasa provided the hyena pack with their own hunting grounds as both a reward for their aid and as a gesture of peace to end their long-time hostility. The hyenas graciously accepted and began to scout the lush new hunting grounds where they would soon eat plentifully. Timon and Pumbaa returned to their oasis, but promised to come by and visit since they had taken a quick liking to the cubs, most especially Pumbaa. Aqua soon regained consciousness, although she was in quite a lot of pain since her ribs had been broken when she was beaten badly by Zero, the Gullwings all tending to her injuries. Master, this has been bugging me for a while. But why hasn't Naruto taken an animal form in this realm? Pain asked, pointing towards the direction of the blonde in question who was being assaulted from all sides by every lioness who wanted to be petted or belly rubbed. The sounds of Mufasa's booming laughter being heard. I have been wondering the same thing myself. It might have to do with him being from the elemental nations, or some other unknown reason. Regardless, his circumstances are a bit unusual. To think, he summoned a Keyblade all on his own without any prior training. Must be something special about him. Bring him over here, I want to speak with him, Aqua requested, prompting the Gullwings to nod and bow as they retrieved the boy, rescuing him from the massive bodies and fur demanding his attention. Be back later, ladies, he reassured the lionesses before turning his attention to the recovering Aqua. I guess it's time we had a long talk about this whole thing. He spoke in a matter-of-fact tone before sitting on the ground in a cross-legged position. I suppose so. I shall sum up everything from the beginning then. A few years ago, the realms were all in a separated but connected existence, all of them unaware of each other, save some important or powerful figures with basic knowledge. Then, the barrier keeping the worlds apart began to fade. If nothing had been done, the worlds would have all collided together and caused untold loss of life. So the realms were all sealed into storybooks excluding your elemental nations, and I have served as the guardian of the realms in the guise of a librarian. As a Keyblade wielder, it is my duty to protect the multiverse from the Heartless and maintain order in the realms. She spoke, giving him the rundown of why he found all those books in the vault and their intended purpose. I see. That clears some things up. So what about those other two? What's this Organization 13 they were talking about? Naruto asked with a confused expression, remembering the name being briefly mentioned earlier. They are nobodies, entities without a heart. Sometimes when a Heartless is created from a person with a strong enough will, the body and soul are left behind. The body gives a nobody its form, and the soul gives it life. The strongest of wills create a human form nobody such as what you saw. They represent Organization 13, a group of nobodies with an unknown purpose or goals. Their activities faded when the worlds were all sealed, but it seems they're back. Sadly, I don't know much about them or their members, but they are not to be taken lightly, she explained as she tapped her claws against the ground and thought. I see. So what happens now and wait? How long have I been gone from Konoha? The whiskered teen asked with wide eyes. Now realizing he must have been gone for too long now, he would most likely face being expelled from the academy. Thus he wouldn't be able to become a ninja. As if sensing his concerns, Aqua spoke in a comforting voice. Don't worry. I'll be sure to help you out of trouble when we go back. As for what comes next, I had originally intended to wipe your memory clean, but circumstances have changed. Now that you can use a Keyblade, I'll become your teacher and train you properly in how to use it. Thanks, I guess I'll have to start calling you Sensei then. I'm actually looking forward to this, because if I train and learn under you, I'll have the chance to see new places and make lots of friends across this multiverse, right? He asked in an excited manner, earning a nod of confirmation from the blue net, finding his heart to be a pure one, free of any corruption or evil intent. Her old friend Tara was not a bad person, but his heart was filled with too much darkness and he was lost to it. She didn't think that this boy would suffer the same fate. Indeed. Go on, go say your goodbyes. We must be going now. Aqua spoke, making a shooing motion prompting the boy to nod with a slightly somber expression as he headed off to say goodbye to all of his friends. As he walked away, Aqua grimaced a bit as she thought about Zero being capable of using a Keyblade. The only plausible explanation is that they were once a Keyblade wielder before their heart was taken by the darkness. But who were they really? As she continued to think to herself in the background, Naruto approached the lions and made his announcement. Well everyone, it's almost time for me to go back home. We faced a lot of bad stuff together, but I'm glad to have met you all. At his words, both Nala and Simba attempted to climb his legs, clinging tightly to him with their legs, as if they were trying to keep him in place. Don't go Naruto, you still have to tell me more about humans and ninjas and stuff, Nala whined cutely. Yeah, you can stay with us, Simba added as he nuzzled the human's leg, both being sad expressions on their faces. Sarabi chuckled as she helped pry them both off the boy's legs and spoke. Now, that wouldn't be fair to our friend. He has his own home to go back to. I am sure that there are some there who would dearly miss him. Yeah, there are, but I promise to come back and visit you all. I'd be a bad friend if I didn't do that much. Naruto reassured the cubs, making them sniffle but reluctantly nod in understanding. The blonde then proceeded to give one last petting to each of the lionesses, some even offering him a hug, including Seraphina and Sarabi. Finally Mufasa came up and spoke. Naruto, you have gone above and beyond the call of duty to protect my family and my pride. From today on, words of your deeds shall forever be spoken and sung. When a cub is named Naruto, it shall mean hero. You will always be welcome here as a friend and a hero. Should you ever need our help, for any reason, at any time, we will be happy to aid you, as you did for us. Thank you so very much, my young friend. As a final thanks, I name you an honorary Lion of Pride, Rock the King announced, and earned a series of approving roars from the lionesses. Naruto teared up a bit and wrapped his arms around the king's neck, hugging him, to which the king returned eagerly. When the two separated, the blonde whistled and called for both Shenzi and Zira to hurry up since it was time to leave. Okay already, and don't whistle at me, I am not some pet you can call whenever you feel like it. Zira spoke in a cranky tone, although she wouldn't admit it out loud. She was actually a bit excited to see the boys home. Is Cat calling you Toots? Shenzi muttered, laughing a bit at her own pun, which earned a glare from the lioness. The two following the boy over to Aqua, who noticed their presence. Wait, you plan on bringing them with us? The blue net asked with a raised eyebrow, pointing a paw at both the hyena and lioness in question. Kinda have to. Shenzi was formerly a subordinate of Scar's, and Zira can't stay cause of the cub growing in her, so they're both banished. They're my responsibility now, and I promised I'd take care of them. Suwo, yeah, they're coming. Naruto spoke in a firm voice, crossing his arms over his since he wasn't going to back down on the subject. I can't say no, can I? Very well. We shall go now. Aqua replied with a small smile, and then summoned her Keyblade, holding it with her tail as they began to fade out of existence, returning to Konoha. As they slowly faded, Naruto waved goodbye to his new friends one last time. And with that, his adventures in the Pride Lands finally came to a close. For now at least. Kingdom Hearts Library Vault. Well, this is new, spoke Aqua as she observed the forms of both Shenzi and Zira. Upon their entry to the elemental nations, it would seem the two had taken on new bodies. Both of them now awkwardly stood on two legs and grew on their region, the two taking on an anthropomorphic form. What is happening to me? What are these round things on my? Why are my paws shaped differently? Why are the round things on Zira's way bigger than mine? And why is my butt so big I look fat now? My butt is all big and jiggly and squishy, Shenzi muttered as she started to smack her new bubble butt, watching it bounce a bit. Zira was busy inspecting her new S, which seemed to be swollen with milk, her tail swishing from side to side a bit. What just happened? Asked the glowing Riku as she tilted her head in confusion. It would seem that this realm has granted them new and more humanoid forms. The elemental nations continue to baffle and confuse me. But it should be possible to make something so that they can change back and forth between their new and original bodies. Aqua explained briefly, while in the background, Naruto could hardly contain his laughter at this new development. It was almost like something from a manga with some eckiness. All I heard was original and bodies. Whatever you need to do to change us back, do so quickly. Standing on two legs is uncomfortable, and this round things are giving me strange feelings too. Zira muttered as she sank to the floor. We'll take care of that later. But for now, it would seem we have a more pressing engagement. Naruto, I think I might have an excuse for your long absence from school. Aqua spoke in a confident manner, making him nod in appreciation. Hopefully it was a good one. Well, he'd just follow her lead and go along with it then. Minutes later, Hokage office. Suwu, let me get this straight. You were locked inside the library the past several days while Aqua-san was away on personal business. Is that right? The Sandaime spoke as he tried to clear things up about Naruto's unexplained disappearance. In the background, Uruka was standing to the side with his arms crossed since he was rather eager to see the boy expelled. Yeah, I fell asleep while trying to study, and I guess Aqua never noticed me when she closed up. The whiskered teen replied, earning a nod of confirmation from the brunette who had a kind smile on her face. Uruka, however, wasn't buying that story whatsoever as he pointed something out. So what did you do for food then? Did you eat the pages from the books? I have a private living space on the upper floors of the library. It is not just my workplace, but my home, complete with a fully stocked kitchen. Naruto has agreed to volunteer at my library for a while to make up for the food he took. Aqua explained, earning a nod of understanding from the Sandaime since that made sense to him. But what about a telephone? Couldn't Naruto have simply called for help? Uruka demanded as if he were conducting an interrogation, though he did bring up a valid point both times. I had all phones disconnected almost a week ago. Certain shady characters kept on yuling me or asking me on dates instead of calling for library-related business. The brunette answered in a blunt manner, glaring at the scarred Chunin since he was definitely amongst them. With your permission, Hokage-sama, I'll be personally tutoring and teaching Naruto from here on. I don't feel that his current class is the right fit for him since I couldn't help but notice that he visits my library frequently. She requested in a polite manner, to which the Hokage made in thought. Now that you mention it, I have been considering finding an alternative for Naruto's education since he seems to be struggling in the academy. I think a more private and one-on-one style would help him more efficiently. The Hokage spoke, giving a small thumbs up to the boy who looked almost ready to explode in glee at the prospect of being free of the academy class. What, so easily? She's not a real teacher. How can she succeed where I failed? The scarred Chunin questioned, finding it ridiculous that the boy was now getting some kind of special treatment. For one thing, she has an entire library for Naruto to freely explore and learn from. For another, she seems willing to put in the effort. I find it odd how a single student can stay in the same class for almost 3 years in a row and still make no improvement in his grades. Who is responsible for this conundrum? Is it a bad student or a bad teacher? The Sandaime spoke with a hint of venom in his voice which seemed directed at the Chunin. The Hokage turned back to both Naruto and Aqua and spoke. For the time being, I place young Naruto in your care. I think a change in environment and teachers may be beneficial to him. You may go now, prompting the two to exit the office after having covered up his sudden disappearance. Once they were out of earshot, the blonde smirked and asked his new master, so what are you going to teach me? First, you going to show me how to fight? I always wanted to learn how to fight with a sword. His eagerness and excitement was refreshing for the brunette, but it wasn't the time to teach him about that just yet. No, you handled yourself well enough from what I heard about the previous battle. Being a Keyblade user isn't just about fighting, it is about protection. Before I teach you to use your strength, you must learn to use your head and your heart first. She spoke with a gentle smile. In response, he simply nodded in understanding, knowing that violence wasn't always the solution. But it did help solve a lot of problems. Meanwhile, Keyblade Graveyard. I don't get it, boss. Why do you always come here? Asked the form of Axel with a small smirk as Zero sat on the cliffside, twirling their thumbs together as they stared down at the countless Keyblades implanted into the ground. Xemnas told of this place. I like to come here to think. As for the why, it reminds me of home. Zero replied in a cryptic manner, a small chuckle coming from their throat. Home, how you were always a big mystery wrapped in a puzzle box. No one knows what realm you came from, or how or why you have a Keyblade. The only real thing we know about you is how powerful you are. I'm curious, why save the Pride Lands like that? Axel asked at the end, wondering what the game was that his boss was playing. The darkness swallowing the Pride Lands wouldn't have been advantageous to my plans. That aside, that Naruto boy provided an amusing spectacle. I just decided to reward him a little for entertaining me. Zero answered in a casual tone, some amusement laced in their voice. I see. So then, Who did the kid remind you of? Axel asked out of simple curiosity, though he was also hoping to dig up a little more on his leader's identity or past. The one person I despise most throughout the multiverse, Kushina Uzumaki. Zero answered coldly, their voice laced with pure hatred that was rather out of character for a nobody. If he didn't know any better, he was certain that Zero possibly had the ability to feel emotion. Zero sighed as they spoke. The multiverse is currently trapped in a stagnant existence. I think we should shake things up a bit, and I think I know a good place to start. At this, the crimson-haired nobody raised an eyebrow out of curiosity and asked where. There's the phrase two sides to every story provide you a hint. Zero chortled in amusement before vanishing into a black rift, leaving Axel behind with his thoughts as he couldn't help but look back and remember when Zero first appeared. Flashback 10 years ago. The numerous members of Organization 13 sat silently as Xemnas welcomed a new member to their ranks. A mysterious nobody with burning crimson eyes with black sclere, their face obscured by a mask of bandages as they wore tattered and white rags that seemed ready to fall apart at any moment. Do you have any questions? The leader finished after his speech. Yes. What is the goal of our group? Zero asked as they stared up at Xemnas, a curious expression forming on his face. Isn't it obvious? We just gotta create our own Kingdom Hearts to restore ourselves. That's why we need your Keyblade to release the hearts trapped by the Heartless. The sole female member, Larxene, spoke with a somewhat annoyed expression. Her answer prompted Zero to burst into laughter. Though it was obviously fake, it still unsettled the nobodies to a degree. That's it, that's why this motley crew is gathered here, to get rid of the greatest blessing one could hope for. Zero questioned in "Are you stupid?" kind of tone. What are you on about? Axel asked her as he laced his fingers together, wondering what this stranger was talking about. What blessing? Existing without a heart is the best thing to ever happen to us, and you want to throw it all away. Without a heart, we do not need to feel unnecessary emotions, such as sorrow or guilt. We do not need to feel anything really. Meaning we can focus on a mission without care or consequence. We can achieve our goal without feeling doubt or a moral crisis. Zero explained in a matter-of-fact tone. And what goal is that? Xemnas asked, not at all liking this newcomer. It seemed they had a problem with authority, his authority. To bring about the end, was all Zero said as a row of sharpened shark-like teeth appeared from the mouth area. I am Zero, and I am the end of all things. And I am now your leader. They finished, and then an invisible force yanked Xemnas off of his throne. The masked nobody raised up their fingers and fed him away as if he were a fly, sending him flying back to his throne and crashing through it. Xemnas had been blown away and overpowered from that move, and all of the other nobodies could feel raw power radiating from the newcomer. If they dared try and stand against Zero, they would be obliterated from existence. Any objections? The masked nobody asked with a somewhat thirsty grin. None of the other nobodies had the gall to reply, so Zero nodded and took their silence as quiet submission. With that out of the way, let's begin making plans to achieve the first step in our goal, the destruction of the barrier separating the realms. Zero spoke with a cold smile, knowing full well what would come next. End flashback. And they did it. They had shattered the barrier keeping the realms apart, largely due to Zero's godlike power. If one had to describe their leader, they were an entity of pure destruction. A cataclysm was averted when the realms were all sealed away into storybooks, but that didn't seem to bother Zero. Instead, they simply muttered things are fine as they are, suggesting that the end of the realms wasn't their goal. So what end was Zero talking about? So many questions, so few answers. Still, he wasn't all bad. Zero was actually a good boss and allowed him and some of the other members do as they liked so long as they didn't go overboard. In either case, that new kid provided an interesting show, and it seemed like Zero took a small interest in him. Only time would tell if he'd be able to make something of himself. Okay, sadly the chapter is over, and if you enjoyed, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.